Hey everybody, welcome to Draft Night. Matthew Coller here with you for a potentially historic night in Vikings history. We are about 30 minutes away from the NFL draft, and we're going to start right out by bringing in Dane Mizutani of the Pioneer Press from TCO Performance Center, where I would be if I was not here watching the broadcast and waiting for everything to happen and talking with all of these Vikings fans to get their reactions to what goes down tonight. Dane, I saw our friend Kevin Seaford talking about what this means, the magnitude of this, and what it means to Kwesi adofo-mensah, Kevin O'Connell. How would you describe that? What this night is going to determine for the future, how they approach it, which quarterback they end up with, if there's any chance they don't end up with a quarterback. What is your feeling going into now 29 minutes from now, this draft night?
It's as big of a day as the Vikings have had in recent memory. I tweeted something out today. I said, finish this following sentence. This is the biggest moment for the Vikings since ... The answers the replies that tweet got, some said ever, some said 2017 NFC Championship game, some said 98. Like, this matters to the fan base for sure. But when you look at Kwesi adofo-mensah and Kevin O'Connell, this matters for them. This is their legacy on the line here. I think both of them, and we've talked a lot about this, have been preparing for this moment right now since they got teamed up and hired, and every move that they've made to this point has been with this draft in mind. I truly believe that. So this night means everything. And the only issue is you're picking 11. Like, you don't have a ton of control with who you're going to get necessarily. You can throw the bag at certain teams, and if they want the guy you want, well, they pick ahead of you. So I think that's probably the biggest point of tension tonight, is that this means so much to so many people, but you're still kind of waiting and seeing. And the word Kevin O'Connell used all along was complicit. You need someone to be complicit to do what you want to do, because you won a few too many games after Kirk Cousins went down. So big night. I'm really excited. Really excited to kind of be on here talking with you about it. And man, let's get this clock rolling. It can't come fast enough.
I know it does feel like this is not just a thing that suddenly happened to the Minnesota Vikings, that this is 3 years in the making. That when Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi adofo-mensah arrived, they pitched, I mean, especially Kwesi adofo-mensah, and then they make the hire, but they pitched a plan and they pitched an idea. Here's how we're going to get your team in competition for the Super Bowl. And that idea was accepted by the Wilfs as the competitive rebuild. I don't know that Kwesi adofo-mensah was ever supposed to tell us that it was a competitive rebuild, but he let that cat out of the bag. We've talked about it so much since. They have really stuck to that, including all the way into the free agency period, where we were not sure on that first day of free agency, is Kirk Cousins coming back or not? We discussed it over and over again, all the pros and cons of bringing him back. And it always came down to, I don't think this was part of the plan. Part of the plan was not to give Kirk Cousins $45 million into year 3 of this regime. It was always to draft a quarterback. And I believe them, Dane, when they have said over and over, we spotted this quarterback class years out. And one thing that I should point out, as I've already seen freak out about which quarterback they're going to pick before it may be like preemptive, people preparing themselves to be hurt again, I suppose, or to not get the quarterback that they want. But it is important to mention that they let Kirk Cousins walk knowing that they were picking 11th, knowing that they were not going to get Caleb Williams, knowing that it was very reasonable to think that they wouldn't be able to get even Drake May at the top of this draft, or even Jaden Daniels. And they still did it with the comfort knowing that maybe it's McCarthy, maybe it's Nix, maybe it's Pennix, that there are quality prospects that will be available to them in a very, very unique draft. So when I look at it as, well, if they pick this guy or they pick that guy, that means that they already identified that they would be comfortable with that person because they knew from the outset that's who they would have ended up with. That's why I don't like when I see all over the place, well, they're going to settle. They might have to settle. I don't look at it that way.
Yeah, I don't either. And I think the only reason the fan base looks at it that way is for the last 2 months, they've been trained to kind of think it's been beaten over their head. Drake May's the guy you pray for, JJ's the guy that you hope to get in a trade up situation. And they've been hearing those two names over and over and over again. That I think anything other than that, which is possible tonight, which in 45 minutes could very well happen. Drake May could go off the board to 3 to New England, and JJ McCarthy, the Vikings could get jumped in line. If that happens, I think Vikings fans will freak out because for the last 2 months, it's been those two guys or nothing. But I think you're right. This is not something that they've just, and they being Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi adofo-mensah, have just willy-nilly jumped into. They've scouted this class. They've honed in on these guys, like you said, 2-3 years out. And while they might have their board, they certainly do have their guys that they probably like more than others. They would not have let it rise to this level of needing a quarterback if they didn't feel comfortable with contingency plan A, contingency plan B, contingency plan C. So what I would caution fans tonight is, if it ends up being Pennix, if it ends up being Nix, this is not a bust of a draft. Whatever quarterback they take, I think we owe it to this regime to let them kind of play it out in the way that they kind of planned a couple of years ago. The only way this night's a bust is if they exit the first round without one.
And when I've spent a lot of time looking at all of these quarterbacks, listening to everybody I can, reading every draft analysis, and what I come away with is that almost every prospect, there's a split. There's certain people think that Bo Nix could be a really excellent NFL quarterback. Certain people wouldn't draft him in the 3rd round. And this even goes for Drake May. Certain people have him ranked as QB5 that are analysts or former NFL quarterbacks. Some of them think he should go number 2 overall to Washington. This applies for every single quarterback. And the reality is that Kevin O'Connell will pick someone that he has met with, that he sat down with, that he has had hands-on coaching with, that he has studied, that he has watched every pass of their career. I promise you that that's happened for a decision like this. The last time we saw Kevin O'Connell, he looked pretty tired, I thought, when he was doing his last press conference, because that man has had some kind of month preparing for this decision. And it was not, again, done with the idea that they would get Drake May or absolutely nothing. It was done with the idea of, what would you pay for this guy? And is it okay if we end up with someone else? What's our plan going to be to build around them? And when they say that they love multiple quarterbacks in this draft, all of their actions lead to that. And trust me, you and I, we've covered this game long enough to have BS meters that go off a lot with football people. And mine is not when it comes to this, because it is in so much lockstep with everything that they have done. So what they've said and what they've done have matched up. And so I am much more apt to say, all right, they've got their quarterback. Now let's see the rest of the plan. Let's see how it plays out. Not, we're going to make a decision tonight on saying, oh, this guy they reached on, this guy they settled on. That's just not my approach to this. And I don't think it should be anybody else's either. But what is your take, though, on the idea, as Tom Pelissero just reported minutes ago, that the Patriots will stay at 3? Is that something we're going to say, I guess the Vikings didn't want to offer enough, or that the Patriots were never serious about trading that pick?
I think if the Patriots end up making that selection at 3, and it sure sounds like that's where it's headed in the next half hour, it's because they've always wanted to make that selection at 3. I think as a general manager, Elliott Wolf would have been doing a disservice to the pick, to the asset that he has in his control, and to the fan base as a whole, if he didn't at least see, is someone willing to go crazy for this? But I think part of that was a negotiation tactic to a degree. But if they end up making the pick, I think it's because they like Drake May all along. I don't think it was, well, we didn't get the 4th first-round pick from somebody. I think they just throw that out there, and you say, like, as the Patriots, that we're willing to do this. We're open for business. They've said all the right things that you say when you're trying to sell an asset. But if all of that kind of intake and information gets, presented to you, and the offers come through and on your table, and you end up still making the pick, like it sounds like they will, and taking Drake May at 3, I think that's because that's the guy you wanted all along. And I think that you just do the other thing to have your due diligence and say, we did canvass the market, we did see what was out there, but this was our guy.
Yeah, and I think as far as the Vikings have gone, they haven't really tried hard to avoid it. That they
Mhm.
have wanted to trade up and wanted to trade up to number 3 with the Patriots to get into that top 3. But if you're New England, it is just very hard to avoid taking someone who could be your potential franchise quarterback. That if you pass up on that and the guy goes to Minnesota and he turns out to be a superstar, everyone's going to circle back and go, what happened there, including, of course,
Mhm.
the owner of the team who is being guided by their leadership. That means that if you're going to take a deal, you also have to have another plan in place for a quarterback in this draft to come away with a quarterback. So it has been thrown out there that maybe New England could move back and then move back up. Do we think that Pelicero's report was one last grasp at, all right, guys, if you don't come in with that one last thing? Or, I mean, it's also possible that New England was saying, all right, give us number 11 and Justin Jefferson, and then we've got a deal. And if you're the Vikings, you just can't go there.
I did sniff a little bit of that. I was like, well, this kind of feels like something that someone asks you to put out as like a last minute Hail Mary. Let's see what we can get. We want more than what we've been offered. But I think it probably just that report comes out because they're not getting what they deem enough to move off of it. And I think it probably comes out because an hour from now, or when that was reported, the draft starts. And I think in that moment, in that war room, you probably start making plans for like, all right, we're going to do it. We're going to take our quarterback of the future. And it sounds like that's what they're going to do. Now, we do have 18 minutes until the draft and probably 20-ish before the Patriots are on the clock, because even though everyone knows Caleb Williams will go 1, they will use every single second of the clock for the drama. And then Washington will go 2. So maybe things will change in the next half hour or so, but it sure seems like anyone who is a Vikings fan and was hoping for Drake May, that ship might be sailing away right now.
Well, and there have been previous years where in the moments leading up to the draft, we learned that someone like Trayvon Walker could go number 1, and then he does. Whereas today, there's been a lot of, looks like the Pats are taking May, looks like the Pats are taking May. And so everything has been trending that way with a little bit of hedging. So it would take some last minute craziness to get Drake May. By the way, all of you joining, thank you so much for tuning in. This is a super exciting night. We've had so much build up to this. Dane Mizutani of the Pioneer Press. We're going to get Will Raggets popping in, Andrew Kramer, all the Vikings beat reporters popping in to the broadcast. Also, your comments, and I've got my TV over here, so I'll be looking over there, reacting to everything that happens. But last thought, Dane, I mean, just let me hear what you think. Like, what is outside of Drake May the best outcome? Give me number 1, number 2 on your board, if you will, for the outcomes that could happen if they are not getting Drake May.
I think in terms of name, like the best next step is probably JJ McCarthy. It just seems like he's a guy who jives with the way the Vikings want to run an offense, the way Kevin O'Connell wants the position to be played. I think getting JJ McCarthy, the best way to do that, the best case scenario, is to call everyone else's bluff and say, do it, trade up, go ahead, Giants, take him, and hope that he falls to 11. Now, do I think they have the gumption to do that if they just missed out on another one of their guys who, if Drake May goes 3? I don't know. It might be hard to sit back for an hour and say, I hope he doesn't go. But that is probably best case scenario in Vikings land. I think the next one is probably just trading up, biting the bullet, getting the guy that you want, assuming it is JJ McCarthy. But I have warmed to the idea a little of, look, you have 11, you have 23, just take 2 good guys and make sure one of them's a quarterback. Now, if JJ McCarthy's off the board by 11, I don't know if I'm waiting to 23 to take Nix or Pennix. I might just pull the trigger there and see if I can get a defensive tackle, or a cornerback at 23. So I've warmed to that idea a little bit, just because I think once you get past the first 3 quarterbacks in the draft, oftentimes the 4th quarterback off the board is no different than the 5th quarterback off the board or the 6th quarterback off the board. So I've warmed to that idea a little bit, but I think JJ McCarthy probably still is option A if it's not Drake May.
And the other thing is, we're going to find out exactly who ranked these quarterbacks correctly because we think we know. And then 15 minutes from now, everything could change. So I'll let you go, Dane. You got to go get to work. This is only a few minutes away. Please pass Will Raggets on, have him pop in from Sports Illustrated. He's the next up that's going to be popping in, but I really appreciate it. And I am excited about our post-draft breakdown podcast whenever we do that, so we can talk for our usual 45 minutes to an hour about this team. But thanks so much for taking the time on a very busy draft night.
For sure. You're killing it, Coller. Keep doing it.
Dane Mizutani, Pioneer Press, always one of my favorite people. Every post game, by the way, if you're new to the channel, if you're new to the podcast, welcome. Appreciate you stopping by. And that's Dane. We do every game from, US Bank Stadium, Chicago, Green Bay, wherever the Vikings are playing. We do a post game podcast just like this with a live broadcast. And a lot of you have watched that at different times. So great to have him on this evening. We'll get Will Raggets in here in just a couple minutes. But I just wanted to say that, when it comes to the Drake May idea, it always made a lot of sense to me that the Vikings would be in a position to trade up and to give away 11, 23, next year's first, whatever else you had to toss on top that wasn't named Justin Jefferson, if you were going to get a quarterback that could potentially be your franchise guy that is reminiscent of the other top quarterbacks in the league. And what I mean is the size, the velocity on the football, the playmaking ability. Drake May just seems to have all of that. And I think that there was maybe some overemphasis on some of his shortcomings. Is his footwork right? Does he have issues with accuracy from time to time? But that sort of throws out the context of Drake May. So if they pull off a last minute trade here in the final moments before this draft, well, that would be still, in my mind, the most ideal situation that could happen to the Minnesota Vikings. But I think because of the other quarterbacks in this draft and the resumes that they have, even down to Bo Nix and Michael Pennix, who I know a lot of you are not as high on that idea, but if they are drafting QB5, we're still talking about quarterbacks who have put up huge numbers, led college football in passing, all sorts of excellent things that they've done in their careers. Now Will Raggets joining from TCO Performance Center. Well, give me your take, Will. We're just going to jump right into it. If it's not Drake May, then who is it and how?
I'm assuming it's going to be JJ McCarthy, and that's kind of the guy that I've had my eye on for a long time now. It's Drake May was the trade up target, and potentially New England maybe wasn't being super. I don't know. Maybe it was a smokescreen that they were demanding a ton, and there would be a way for that to be worked out, but doesn't seem like it with about 30 minutes or 40 minutes or whatever until the Patriots are on the clock. Seems like that's not happening. So I'm guessing it's McCarthy because all the buzz has been that the Giants aren't really a landing spot for McCarthy. I don't know what to believe. It's hard to ever really know what to believe. So I don't know if the Vikings feel like they have to get ahead of the Giants or if they can wait and let McCarthy come to them and maybe go up a little bit to ensure that they don't get jumped by Denver or Vegas or whoever. But if it's not McCarthy and they end up with Pennix or Nix, it's just a tougher sell for me, I think for the fan base. And even if it's McCarthy at 11, there's just a lot of questions about why'd you do the trade to get the 23rd pick if you're just going to stay at 11? So we'll see. To me, McCarthy is the guy.
Is it also possible that trading for the 23rd pick had to do with how this draft works out? I mean, one, flexibility was the word that they have used over and over again. So if the Patriots were open for business, they could be at the front of the line. But even then, you've seen a handful of teams have come out with, or at least reports leaked out, well, we only have about 15 players that we think are true first round talents in this draft. Some of them have to be on defense. And if you're drafting 23rd, all these offensive players going early in the draft, I've always thought that it would be a positive outcome for this team, considering where Brian Flores could take this defense if they were able to stick and pick. The other thing, too, is it makes it hurt less if it doesn't work. And I'm not going down that road of, oh, it's going to be a bust or whatever. But if Sam Darnold ends up being your quarterback and 11 doesn't work, but you get a star defensive player, it doesn't destroy the franchise like it would if you were, say, trading 3 first-round picks for Drake May if that didn't work out. That's sort of some of my logic of having 23 is still a very good thing for them, regardless if they weren't able to use it.
Yeah, if you just remove the trade up for a quarterback thing, which still could happen, they could still go up to 4 or 5 if they really want to lock in McCarthy, assuming that it's Williams, Daniels, May. If you remove that from the equation, I understand getting another first-round pick. You get that extra year of control. There's maybe tiers of players in this draft. But in general, I think teams overestimate their ability to identify those players. So I would rather have the 42nd overall pick and the second next year than the 23rd pick in this year's draft, because you could probably still get a pretty good defensive player at 42 or in that range. But 23rd is certainly higher. Some of these kind of tier 1 guys that you talk about, like Johnny Newton from Illinois, Nate Wiggins, the Clemson cornerback, Latu from UCLA, if the medicals, if he falls, like those are the kinds of guys you can get at 23 that you wouldn't be able to get at 42. But then again, who's to say that they're going to be good and Chop Robinson, whoever gets picked at 42 or so, isn't going to be good. I don't know. It's all just a crapshoot that I'd rather have the 2 cracks at it in the second round than the 1 late first.
I think normally I would be on board with you just because, I mean, that's obvious. 2 picks that are really good are better than 1 pick that's excellent. But at the same time, in this year's draft in particular, if you're talking about the difference between a second round draft talent versus someone who is going to be maybe the 5th or 7th best defensive player, I think I'd prefer to get the better prospect. I also think that when they traded for 23, they thought we have a chance to package this together and make this work for the Patriots. I imagine that the Patriots said, we're open for business. What can you put together? And so they decided to do it, but also it potentially gives them the flexibility to get to number 5 and pick JJ McCarthy with the 5th overall pick. That's if they actually like JJ McCarthy as much as everyone thinks they do. But having that opportunity wouldn't be there in the same way if they were competing with Denver. And Denver could say, well, we could put together the same exact package. Now the Vikings can top Denver if they need to be able to move up. Is the McCarthy plan, do you look at that as economically worth it? So if it was your choice between Michael Pennix at 11, let's just say, and we had just assumed that O'Connell likes the guy that they're picking, but is it economically worth it to just stick and pick at 11 or trade 11, 23 and whatever else? Maybe it's the first round pick from next year, but even if it was just 11 and 23 for McCarthy, is the gap between those 2 quarterbacks enough, or the odds you think enough to add in extra draft capital to go get McCarthy?
Yeah, it's tough because for me, on the one hand, it is, I think, because I'd rather have the 21-year-old quarterback who hasn't lost any games in his career and has a lot of the traits that you look for over the Pennix or Nix who are 24 and there's a lot of tape of them and a lot of things that maybe they're never going to be. But then that kind of contradicts what I was just saying about the NFL not really knowing how to do any of this. And so I can see the other side of the argument too, which is just, if let McCarthy fall, if he gets there, great. But if you don't have a huge separation between them on your board and somebody wants to go trade up and get McCarthy, let them and take Pennix or Nix. I would probably, safe thing, I guess not the safe thing, but it depends on your approach. But I would go and get McCarthy, I think, at 5. Or, I mean, ideally he gets past the Giants, you can go get him at 8. But I would go get him at 5 if you're able to keep the first rounder next year and just do 11 and 23 and maybe a future 3rd or something like that. Do you think there's any chance that they take like Byron Murphy, the D tackle, at 11 and wait till the 2nd pick on quarterback? Because that would almost be like, all right, we got this 23rd pick, so now we can wait and get Bo Nix there or something. But then I just feel like that opens you up to the possibility of getting shut out of these top 6 quarterbacks entirely, which would be nothing short of a disaster, because then your quarterback room is Sam Darnold and Spencer Rattler.
And Jaron Hall. Don't forget Jaron Hall.
Nick Mullins.
Under contract. Maybe Case Cookus will return, but I can already feel the tension from Vikings fans in the chat all day on social media, waiting for this moment to happen. Can you imagine if they were waiting until the 20th, the 21st, the 22nd, and these picks are slowly rolling by and they still don't have their quarterback? Is it possible? Yeah, it is possible that they could look around and say, all right, well, nobody else that we could think of is going to have a grade on this guy that's going to be higher, so we're going to take him. He's the one that we like, whoever it is, Nix, Pennix, that maybe the draft analysts were too high on Nix to Denver, and we know he's going to fall, so we could get our guy there. But that just seems way too risky to me. And I know that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah always wants to pay his price for things, and that has cost them in some ways, like signing Dalton Reisner quick enough, but this is just so much bigger than any of that. This is not the time. This is not the time to draw your lines in the sand. If just for example, you have Kevin O'Connell say, look, I have a big gap between McCarthy and Nix, a big gap between McCarthy and Pennix, then yes, you trade what it takes. And I would even throw into that mix that you trade next year's first round draft pick if there is a big gap between those quarterbacks. I don't know that there is. If there's not, then I might look at it different, like wait till 11. Can't wait till number 23, though, I think. If they even pick 23, that's going to make this a long and very interesting night. Before you go, though, Will, I want to hear your opinion. I threw it out to Dane Mizutani earlier just about this thing coming together over multiple years. And I think that it's made their regime look like, for better or worse, we'll find out, but look like they have had a plan and stuck to it and executed it to this moment. And what we're looking for here is to complete the circle of the entire plan. So how do you think that they have executed that up until this point to set themselves up to draft a quarterback?
I think it's gone well. I mean, we've talked about this in the past. Like, they came in with the competitive rebuild thing. They won a bunch of games in 2022. They didn't read too much into that, and they still refreshed the future salary cap stuff last offseason. They didn't extend Kirk because he wanted multiple years. And then last year happened, and they weren't predicting Jefferson getting hurt and Cousins getting hurt, but it set them up as well as it probably can be with the talent on this roster and with Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores on the coaching staff. Like, it took the quarterback injuries to even get them to the 11th pick. And now they're set up well. It's just, can they complete it and can they execute the final step this offseason? And I keep coming back to that trade for 23. Like, why do that unless you had something else lined up? And maybe it'll all work out tonight. And I mean, whatever happens, they're going to frame it publicly like this was the plan all along. And we'll have to maybe read between the lines of whether we agree with that or not. But yeah, they're here. They've gotten to this point. It was always going to be tough when you pull out that win against the Raiders or whatever that bumped you 4 spots back. Like, this would be a lot easier if they were in the 6th or 7th or even 8th spot, something like that. But the opportunities are there. I think the steam about McCarthy falling further than people expected, it seems real. I mean, every draft analyst you look at their final mock draft, they had the Vikings taking McCarthy somewhere in 7 to 11, somewhere in that range. So if they can pull that off, and ideally you keep the 23rd pick, even if you don't, that to me feels like a win, because McCarthy has such a skill set and a mentality, and just there's a lot to like about him and how he would fit in this offense. So if they come out of this night with JJ McCarthy, I will have felt good about the plan up to this point, and where they're going to go from here. If they don't, I'll have some questions, but we'll see.
I am told that ESPN was just reporting that it's either JJ McCarthy or Michael Pennix will be their target if they cannot make that last second trade up to get Drake May. So we will see. Before you head out, Will, and send Andrew Kramer, the Star Tribune, in here, What do you think? What do you think's going to happen, man?
I think it's McCarthy. I mean, that's probably a pretty safe prediction to make, but I think it'll be McCarthy. I think ultimately they do go up a few spots, and I think 8 with the Falcons makes a lot of sense, just to because they're going to be getting antsy up there and not want to fully wait and hope that he gets all the way to 11. So I think they go up to like 8 and they get McCarthy, and I think you can do that with holding on to the second pick, and then they get a pretty good defensive player, and it would make sense if they trade up a little bit and give up some mid-round draft capital to then trade back a little bit from 23, unless there's a guy that they really love there. So that would be my prediction. Trade up slightly and then trade back slightly, because we know Kwesi loves to wheel and deal during these drafts.
I think that scenario with not giving up too much and still getting McCarthy, maybe it's at 7 with Tennessee, or if they were to stick and pick at 11 with Pennix, both of those to me would be pretty ideal for the Minnesota Vikings. And I could see both of them being a really good fit. I know that there are things about Pennix that scare people, but I've really been on his train the entire time because of what we saw him do last season and the arm talent. You cannot ignore the way that man throws football.
I don't want to sound like I'm out on Pennix. Like, I think I could talk myself into that. I mean, when I was watching the national semifinal, like everybody else, and thinking about him throwing those deep balls to Jefferson and Addison, I just think there's some things with the age and the injury history those are low hanging fruit. I think there's some things with his mechanics thrown over the middle of the field, but that can perhaps be cleaned up. I think the upside would still be there if Pennix is the guy, and it'd be fun to watch for sure.
Yep. And I think personality-wise, he would fit well with Kevin O'Connell from what I've seen. Mm-hmm. Will, thanks so much. Will, Ragged Sports Illustrated, pass along Andrew Kramer into us here on the broadcast. We'll get him before we start getting into draft picks and reacting. So I really appreciate the time, though, man. Thanks for stopping in.
Yeah, no problem. Have a good one tonight.
Football. It's actually funny because I'm looking over at the TV and I'm seeing, I'm sorry, I don't know which reporter it was, but they're like in the next room over from where Will and Dane are. I don't know where Andrew Kramer is coming from. Where are you? Oh, you're on the hallway. Okay, what's going on? Andrew Kramer, Star Tribune. I'm not sure. Can you hear me okay, Andrew? You're just poking the screen. Can you hear me? Can we hear each other? I can kind of hear you. Yes, no, maybe. Well, you look great. Oh, and now we've hit the ground.
Hey, Matt, can you hear me?
Okay, now we got, can you hear me? Are we good?
I can't hear you for some reason.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know why that would be.
My volume's on.
All right, how about now? No luck? Okay, well, this has really stalled the broadcast, Andrew. We had such great momentum, especially technologically, and now we're falling apart here at the seams. I'm going to pull you out for a second. I'll bring you back in. Everything was going perfect until Andrew had to ruin it. But it is funny because Andrew's right around the corner from the ESPN broadcast, their reporter that's out there as well. So he's staring at himself in the phone the way that commercial worked, where the person was trying to find the passwords. So we'll see if he can hear me now. Give me a thumbs up. Can you hear me now? Yay. Okay. Yep. I could have just said yes, I guess. So what's going on, man?
Not too much, right? Just wait on the Vikings to make a historically, franchise changing decision.
That's all. Nothing big or nothing. All right. Well, what do you think happens? I got Will's opinion. I got Dane's opinion. What do you think?
I think they're going to end up getting J.J. McCarthy. That's my final take and prediction on it, which means that they're definitely not, because I'm always wrong on these things. But from what I can glean and from everything we've heard, the love is true with him in the Vikings. They obviously love Drake May. They love other options in this class as well. But the closer they've gotten to J.J. McCarthy, the more that they've liked. So it was interesting to hear him go on like the Rich Eisen show and say that he expects them to the Giants at number 6 to potentially take him. So you're wondering if he's sending a message out to a team like the Vikings, who a lot of these quarterbacks should want to go to in terms of a great landing spot, all the talent, the coach, everything the Vikings have to offer. If he wasn't sending a message to them saying, hey, come and get me if you really want me. And I think the Vikings are going to do that at potentially number 4 overall.
Okay, so if it's number 4 or number 5, how much is that worth? Does that just have to be 11 and 23, or could that be more than that if they really like him that much?
Yeah, it could be more than that. I think it's interesting to hear all the rumors, right, and about how these offers or what these teams are asking for in the top 5 to move back is there's a premium being put on it because the quarterback class. These teams are saying, look, we understand it's not only a great quarterback class, we understand it's also a great wide receiver class as well. And if we're going to move off of Marvin Harrison or Malik Neighbors, you're going to have to pay a premium. This is not any regular draft class. So I think if you look at all the charts, 11 and 23 should be more than enough to move up and get the number 5 overall pick, let's say. But is a new GM in Los Angeles and the Chargers, are they going to play hardball, which I think they might? And I think the Vikings are going to have to make a Godfather offer to go up, even if we're not talking about number 3 and Drake May anymore, if we're talking about number 4 or 5. I think it's going to be a price that fans are saying, oh boy, but people are going to probably be happy that they made the decision to move up if that's what they do.
And if they don't stay at 11 and it ends up being Michael Pennix, this is a favorable outcome for me because I've just watched so much Michael Pennix this year and have talked about him, I feel like, forever. And it would justify all that talk. Now, if he goes in the 3rd round, then it most certainly would not. But what would be their plan, do you think, with the 23rd pick if they ended up picking their quarterback of the future at number 11?
Yeah, maybe best defender available. And honestly, with what that depth chart looks like right now for Brian Flores, I know Flores kind of made the case when he spoke to us local reporters about how corner, that you always need one more kind of thing, echoing Mike Zimmer. But they could use the best defensive lineman available. They could use the best edge rusher left if one of these top 3 guys happens to fall that far. I really think they can't be too picky because of how lacking in blue chip talent this defensive depth chart is right now. And we talk all offseason about Flores and what he did for a reason, because he was working, he made chicken salad, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. So he wasn't working with a whole lot. So if you're sitting there at 23 and the Vikings still have pick 23, it's got to be best defender available, and I don't know how you would go any other direction.
Would you prefer the, as you called it, Godfather offer, JJ McCarthy, or a defensive player in Pennix? I mean, because we know that the general manager of this team looks at things through an economic background and an asset management for these players and so forth. And I just wonder, when it comes to Kevin O'Connell's evaluations, if they're close, if Kwesi Adofo-Mensah would argue, look, there's really no question of which one of these things could add up to more potential value if they are close as quarterbacks. JJ McCarthy would have to be a lot better than Michael Pennix, in my mind, in order to trade the 23rd and next year's 1st round draft pick, because that's a lot of surplus value that you'd be getting from rookie contracts for a defensive tackle or for a cornerback.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And where this would fall potentially toward them moving up for McCarthy is if they get scared off of Pennix and Nix and they feel like there is no second tier beyond McCarthy. If for whatever reason, if it's medicals for Pennix, whatever reasons for Nix they could mark on him in terms of just maybe not being a complete player that they'd have to offer at this point, that could be the reason why they would think, you know what, we can't afford to wait and mess around. We need to move up for McCarthy. Because you're right, if they think Pennix is not that different from McCarthy, why not take those assets? And you heard Kwesi Adofo-Mensah say it when he was talking to reporters earlier this month. He said, we need to find out kind of where our offer falls and what kind of team we want to be. If the quarterback, the guy, doesn't have enough talent, we need to be the team that surrounds him with enough talent, meaning that we need to be the Niners, whichever other teams have kind of put together runs with mediocre quarterbacks, maybe even 2017 with the Vikings when they did it with Case Keenum. The Vikings need to try to be that kind of roster if they do get a McCarthy or a Pennix or one of these guys that isn't viewed as transcendent, whether that's fair or not, because we're doing this on April, whatever, in 2024.
Yeah, and I also think that maybe, I mean, the way he's framing it is, hey, if it's not Mahomes and it has to be somebody else. I mean, what were the odds that Drake May was going to become Mahomes anyway? That was kind of what I was thinking, is maybe set the bar at Matthew Stafford as the best possible outcome, because Mahomes is the greatest quarterback of this generation. And how many other quarterbacks drag their teams deep into the playoffs. I mean, maybe 3 in the league at any given time throughout NFL history, 3 to 5 quarterbacks who are capable of actually doing that. And that's where the math starts to come in, which is, which is just the math starts to come in there where it's like, all right, what are the odds that that happens versus what are the odds that even he just becomes a quarterback that could go either way based on your team. And then you spent all that draft capital for a quarterback that is, maybe has the same things as Jalen Hurts or as Brock Purdy, which I think is 90% of everyone who gets under center.
That's fair. That's fair. And you know what? If Drake May, though, if they view him in a Josh Allen-like type, Kevin O'Connell can say to himself, you know what? We don't need to have a lights-out defense to win with this guy. Excuse me. This guy can put up 30-plus for us. Or maybe he doesn't feel that McCarthy can elevate the offense over a great transcendent defense in the same way that somebody with the talent or the skills that you hear about that May seems to have in terms of the arm, the size, the mobility, all these things. You hear people talk about McCarthy and they mention Alex Smith. Doesn't that make you think a little bit, this is probably more the type of guy we need to surround with a much better team like a Brock Purdy, for instance, even if McCarthy is a better version of that, then they would. And so I agree with you, but I think you look at Joe Burrow, 2020. They made it to the Super Bowl pretty quickly with him. You mentioned Mahomes. There are very few guys, but the hope is that you're getting that in Drake May if you are making that offer to move up for him.
Right. That you're getting a difference-making quarterback that can put you in the playoffs, even if your team gets hurt. And then we heard Kwesi Adofo-Mensah say that earlier this year when they missed the playoffs, is that we need to be so good that we are context proof, that it isn't an injury or two that could send you spiraling. Obviously to the quarterback it would, but the quarterback could overcome struggles on defense where you win those games that you give up 30 points rather than saying, well, our defense failed us, which we heard so much during the Kirk Cousins era. So Roger Goodell is talking now. I assume they're booing him. We've got kind of a pep rally thing. The Chicago Bears are about to get on the clock, which means I need to let you go do your job. But before you go, tell me what you think is going to go down here in the next, I don't know. Is it going to be 20 minutes? Is it going to be 2 hours for the Minnesota Vikings? What do you think?
I'm fascinated to see because it feels like the first 3 picks are kind of set, right? Gerard Mayo was addressing Patriots fans at their draft watch party saying, we're going to have a great pick at number 3 overall. He would be seeming to send the message that we're staying at number 3. If that's the case, then does JJ McCarthy fall? That's the fascinating storyline. Is this guy's been talked up to this point? Does he slip in a way that it's a perceived draft fall because of how much he's been talked up? That's what I'm going to be fascinated to see. Or do the Vikings just not play chicken and just jump up there and go and take him a way that we've all kind of talked about and predicted? But I think the Vikings end up with a quarterback, obviously. I think they've put in too much work at this point to not come away with one. That's why I think they'll be aggressive. And if it's got to be McCarthy after the top 3, then that's who it's got to be.
Andrew Kramer, Star Tribune. You'll be covering all of it, and a draft that I'm sure none of us will ever forget what happens here tonight. We just don't know what we're going to think of it for quite some time. So thanks so much for your time, man. Get back into that room and start watching the rest of this draft. The Bears are on the clock. Can't imagine who they're going to pick. You got to go find out. So, but no, I really appreciate you coming on the broadcast here. Thanks a lot, man.
Of course, man. Thanks a lot, Matt.
Andrew Kramer, Star Tribune. There you go. You've heard from the beat reporters inside TCO Performance Center and wherever the heck Andrew was in a echoey hallway. But one of my favorite people, Andrew Kramer, to talk football with. And you heard him break it all down there. And it does feel like JJ McCarthy momentum is growing here as the likelihood of Drake May at number 3 overall reduces with every moment that we have not gotten a trade announced. And if producer Jonathan Harrison sees on Twitter anything break, he'll pop in and give us the immediate news. But right now, the Chicago Bears are on the clock, about 7 minutes left. There is really no question who the Chicago Bears are going to pick. That is Caleb Williams. But this right here, this pick by the Chicago Bears is very relevant to me as far as the Vikings approach to how they're going to build a complete team. Because when you start to look at how it's come together for the Bears, and I'm sure some of you think that the Bears will never, ever have a good quarterback. And maybe that's true. They're going to build a stadium with a roof on it. That might help a little bit from all their failed quarterback play. But if Caleb Williams does become a star quarterback in the NFL, then it really matters to the Vikings and what they're able to do here to have a quarterback that can go toe-to-toe with Caleb Williams, whether that's because he's good enough and talented enough by raw talent standards, or whether he has enough around him in the right system and the right defense and all those things to be able to beat the Chicago Bears, because what they've done over the last couple of years with going all the way to the bottom, fully rebuilding, and then just falling into a pot of gold with the number 1 overall pick from the Carolina Panthers, they're going to be something to reckon with for years to come. If Caleb Williams even becomes a good quarterback, much less a great quarterback, if he even becomes Matthew Stafford caliber of that fringe top 10, then they're going to have a good enough team to be really good. And you talk about the Packers and what they have in Jordan Love, who's going to be there for some time. And then even when you look at where the Detroit Lions are, they are not going anywhere. The Lions, at least for the next couple of years, they're starting to get expensive, as we saw this week from contract extensions for Amon-Ra St. Brown, Penei Sewell, and it's going to be harder for the Lions going forward, but not immediately. It'll take a couple of seasons because they've drafted well, and especially that last year's draft gives them so much surplus value with young star players that they're going to be competitive for some time. And Jared Goff's not old. He is not a guy who should age poorly considering how he plays football, which is always from the pocket and not relying on his raw physical skills. So this Caleb Williams pick then put together with, assuming they have not selected him on my TV yet, but when they do select Caleb Williams, it really just highlights what we've talked about leading up to this, which is that the NFC North is going to be a bear, so to speak, in the coming years, because all of these teams took different paths there, but they took paths that needed some rebuilding element to it. The Chicago Bears, when they hired Ryan Poles at the same time as Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, and this is why this is so interesting, because I wrote on the day that they hired Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, I think it was maybe a day before that Ryan Poles was hired, that this was kind of a race, a rebuild race of Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and the Vikings, Ryan Poles and the Bears, and they took different routes to it. Ryan Poles said, no, we are tearing this all up. We are going all the way to the bottom. We're going to get a bunch of draft picks and we're going to tank around Justin Fields and go from there and try to get our future quarterback a couple years down the road when we go all the way to the bottom. And they did that and then got super stupid lucky with trading with the team that ended up with the number 1 overall pick. And then when you look at what the Packers did, that was more of a competitive rebuild where they moved on from Devontae Adams and they got younger at certain positions while Aaron Rodgers was still there and waited on Jordan Love. And then, in Detroit, they also tanked. They just did it a year earlier than Chicago and then quickly bounced back, a 9-8 season. And now, an NFC championship team. So the Vikings here, as we've got the pick in, and they are showing Caleb Williams as we wait, but the pick is in for Chicago. But, the Vikings took this different sort of route than Chicago and then Detroit. And we're kind of going to find out who ended up being right. And I think right now you might argue that the Bears were right, because in the competitive part of the competitive rebuild, the Vikings had an entertaining 2022 season. It was miserable in Chicago. It was entertaining here for the 2022 season, but both got them 0 playoff wins. And now the Bears are set up. They're all hugging and everything else inside their draft room, and they're set up to have their quarterback and build for the future. So the Vikings need to hit on the pick. They need to pick someone that's going to be able to do everything Kevin O'Connell needs to do. If they can't get Drake May, that puts more pressure on Brian Flores, puts more pressure on Kwesi Adofo-Mensah to build it correctly and to have a defense. You're going to have a defense that is top notch because of sheerly who you are playing against. Over 6 games out of 17 per season are going against, if Caleb Williams becomes good, that 3 very talented quarterbacks, and 2 of them that'll be the number 1 overall pick, and another first rounder who's 6'4" and throws lasers. So there you have it. Caleb Williams is the pick. And I know that it's a Viking show, but well done, Chicago. Well done, Chicago, to get to this position, to take somebody of his caliber as a prospect. It might work out. It might not, but it's the plan that a lot of us were advocating for the Vikings when they were hiring a GM, was to try to do something like this. And hey, remember 17 years ago when we talked about whether Justin Fields would be the guy and so forth? It now becomes very, very clear with Caleb Williams. This was their plan the whole time, no matter almost what Justin Fields did, unless he became a superstar. But instead, he threw for like 2,500 yards, and they have made the right choice in drafting Caleb Williams, number 1 overall, moving on from Justin Fields, to which we saw Pittsburgh give up almost nothing for him. And he's got a lot to work with. I don't think it's as good as the Vikings, but Caleb Williams is going to have a lot to work with there. They went out and got Keenan Allen, another good move by the Bears. All I'm saying is that there's more pressure. When the Bears are doing good things, there's more pressure, because they have so often been, they pop up every once in a while with a good defense, but then they go right back into the NFC North closet and they are mediocre, and you go, to Soldier Field and weird things happen sometimes, but for the most part, they're a beatable team. Now they might be a serious team under Ryan Poles, and there will be questions about Matt Eberflus and their offensive coordinator, is that Shane Waldron, and how they can build an offense for Caleb Williams, and whether they can, get him to play on time and not fumble the football, as he did have problems doing. I have not looked at Caleb Williams as somebody who is a perfect prospect. And now Washington is on the clock, as they are expected to pick Jaden Daniels, but this is where the draft starts, and we don't know who Washington's going to pick. Consistently, we heard throughout these last few days that nobody knows who Washington's going to pick. So the tension really begins now, and the anxiousness really begins now, counting down to when the Vikings will draft a quarterback. We don't know when it's going to be. Could be with the next pick. Could be down the road. Jonathan Harrison, do you have news to share?
Just an update on where things stand from a trade perspective. Jeff Darlington, who is at TCO Performance Center, said he met with Vikings head coach Kevin O'Connell an hour ago, told him they've worked through plans for every scenario. Separately, sources tell him Vikings are prepared to continue talks with Patriots when New England is on the clock. May is a player to watch, but trade comp is still way off.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate that. Jonathan Harrison producing and also keeping track of all the rumors for tonight. Compensation way off. If it's way off, it means they didn't want to do it, right? Because the Vikings had the compensation that they would need to offer a good package to the New England Patriots with 11 and 23, and they could throw in their first round from next year. Now, this will be quite interesting when the draft gets over and somebody leaks out, here's what the New England Patriots got for offers. Over there with the Patriots, they have a lot of reporters. Somebody is going to figure out, or some insider is going to be told, yes, this is what we got offered. And if the Vikings did offer less than 11, 23, and next year's first, then we may have some questions about that. Under most of these circumstances that we've talked about, the potential scenarios, I've always kind of gone along with, all right, this one makes sense. This one makes sense. And this is probably what they're offering. But if they were not offering next year's first, then I will say, really? Okay. That's a report that likely comes out in a couple of days. Somebody ends up asking behind the scenes. They say, well, we've already got our pick. Who cares? Here's what happened. Or does this get to the last moment and they finally say, all right, here we go. And something that has been on my mind throughout this entire thing since they traded for the 23rd pick was that they might want to know what Washington does. Because I just said that all the reports out of DC are, we have no idea. They're not leaking. They're not telling anybody. They're not hinting. So how can we possibly say? Maybe the Vikings were not willing to make their Godfather offer that they can't refuse until they know what Washington is going to be doing with the number 2 overall pick, which we will find out within the next couple of minutes here. And I've got my alerts going on. We got Jonathan paying attention. So we'll find out as soon as we can. But Washington is a total wild card in this draft. We have just been assuming that Drake May is going number 3. He could be going number 2 here to Washington. Jaden Daniels has made the most sense with the tea leaves, which would be, they bring in Cliff Kingsbury, who worked with a running quarterback before. They move on from Sam Howell, who's close friends with Drake May. They go get Marcus Mariota, who's a running quarterback. So a little bit of those things. And then even the fact that the agent was not happy with what was going on with the visits and so forth made you think, all right, well, would they really care if they didn't think there was any chance that they were going to draft Jaden Daniels? So now we've got Washington people hugging, which means the pick is in for Washington. And this is where we start to find out how the ball is going to roll. Are the Vikings going to come in the last second to the New England Patriots and make a huge offer to move up to number 2? Will they wait? Will they get to 4? Will they get to 5? Or will they sit at number 11 and 23? In which case it could be a very, very long and fascinating night to see that happen. So right now, when we find out what happens with number 2, then we'll be able to better say, all right, it's either, make that huge offer for Drake May or wait or try to get McCarthy. But we're going to find out in just seconds here what Washington is going to do. And that really will lay out the path for everybody else. If they shock everybody and take Drake May, well, then that kind of changes everything. And the name that we really have not heard much at all with the Vikings is Jaden Daniels. That doesn't necessarily mean that they wouldn't be interested, but it might change the math if they said we would pay X for Jaden Daniels and Y for Drake May. So, all right, here we go. The commissioner announcing number 2 overall pick. And now this is setting up, it seems, yes, with Jaden Daniels in the way that we all expected. Number 1, Caleb Williams. Number 2, Jaden Daniels. And off we go. So now the New England Patriots are on the clock. They have said over and over and over again, we are open for business, but we also like Drake May, but we're open for business. How much are the Vikings going to be willing in this next, what do they get? How many minutes? 7 minutes? 6 minutes? I don't know how many they get. 10 minutes? Whatever it is, the next few minutes, how much are the Vikings going to be able to push to the middle of the table? And if they are not willing to go all in to the level of a Mike Ditka for Ricky Williams type of trade, then things get very interesting. Then the options start to open up. And if it's between Pennix and McCarthy, then the New York Giants, are they going to be willing to move up to get JJ McCarthy? The other point, there's another point to be made here too, that, Adam Schefter says that there is 0 chance now the Patriots trade the number 3 pick. So there you go. That's what he's saying now, that there is 0 chance. Well, that is pretty definitive from Adam Schefter. He, I imagine, must have just gotten a text from somebody within the Patriots room that this is not happening. If the Patriots decide to stay and there's no chance, then in my opinion, they were never serious. They were never moving. Of all the times they said we're open for business, they did it to just not tell anybody what they were doing. And it might be possible that they didn't want Washington to get any hints about who they wanted, etc. It could just be that the NFL really doesn't want the teams to tell people what they're going to do, that there's always a scenario. It's sort of like if you ask a coach, hey, could you see this guy playing? And they say, well, yeah, maybe, even if there's no chance the guy's actually going to play, because sure, there's always a world where something could happen. If you were the Patriots, there's always a world where you could see someone offering Justin Jefferson and 2 firsts, and you say, all right, then you get Drake May. But whatever the offer you can't refuse is, the Vikings had to walk away from that price because it was simply impossible for them to do. And I imagine that had to, and again, we're going to find out, but I imagine that it had to involve something like either 4 firsts or Justin Jefferson for the Vikings to not do this. For the amount of times that the Vikings talked about wanting to do this, wanting to move up, even Kevin O'Connell joking around in the last minutes about, trading up and getting Drake May or whatever, trying to get to, number 3 with the New England Patriots in his public speech. I mean, clearly the Vikings wanted to do this. It's just that the Patriots, it seems, if Adam Schefter is correct, I'm assuming he is, the pick is in. I'm assuming it's going to be Drake May. And the dream dies there for Vikings fans of getting Drake May. But I don't think that that's because the Vikings didn't try. Everything indicated, and we will soon, I'm sure, find out from Adam Schefter or whoever, the Vikings will tell Jeff Darlington, who's out there in their facility, what they tried to offer to go up and get Drake May. But the fact that it didn't happen has to mean the Patriots were always taking him. And this is why you tank. Truly, this is why you tank, because these 3 teams at the top of this draft are joke shows, but now they're getting these great quarterback prospects with an opportunity to go be great. And the Vikings instead did things like keeping Danielle Hunter, keeping Kirk Cousins last year, and they end up with now not being able to get their quarterback. So like Drake May also, by the way, is a very sad boy today. I would guess that I am thinking that Drake May should sit for an entire year because they have nothing to work with in New England. And there have been plenty of quarterbacks who have found a way after going to teams that did not have a whole lot to work with, that, maybe you get a couple of receivers here or there or whatever it might be, and you build quickly. That was Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow went to a very sad down and out franchise, but even someone like Trevor Lawrence, it's been a couple years now. They have that one playoff win. They still haven't been able to build up a good enough team. The Drake May is, I imagine, quite disappointed that he will not be in purple and instead has to go to a total rebuild situation. But also, if you're the New England Patriots, now I could argue all day long and say to Robert Kraft, hey, buddy, you should trade back because you're going to hurt the chances. But if you're the Patriots, who's in your division? Josh Allen. How are you planning to go against Josh Allen for years to come without somebody who has freakish talent? And I would guess that is the thing that they just simply could not pass up, is having a quarterback with that much skill is going to be required in order to go up against the great Miami offense, to go up against the Buffalo Bills for years to come. Even the New York Jets have a really good defense and a good defensive coach. It's going to be quite an uphill battle for Drake May. We've also seen teams turn around so fast, though. We have. And they now, without Belichick running everything, and there it is on my TV. I might be a few seconds behind you guys, but there it is, Drake May to the New England Patriots. Now that Belichick is gone, maybe they have a better chance to quickly rebuild. And it's probably a good thing that he's not the problem of the NFC if he has a chance to be as good as we think he could be. I was going to make a point about that with Jaden Daniels, by the way, that for years, it seemed like the AFC was drafting all the quarterbacks and all the quarterbacks that were becoming great. And the NFC with their quarterbacks, they were getting old, Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady with the Bucks. And we've seen a transition a little bit here, but now the number 1 and number 2 pick just landed in the NFC. And even if 1 out of 2 of them becomes very good, or if they both become very good, this is just stronger competition for the Minnesota Vikings. And it speaks to their need to get a right quarterback here and make the right quarterback pick. But I look at what's happening here now. The offer is probably going to come out eventually, what the Patriots were asking for. But my takeaway here with them all day saying, I guess, maybe all day, I would guess, okay, now we're also getting from Schefter that the Cardinals are going to stick and pick as well. And so 5, if they do get either Malik Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr., probably Marvin Harrison Jr., 5 then becomes the spot potentially for the Vikings to trade up. They've got to be on the phone right now with the Los Angeles Chargers. But going back to Drake May not becoming a Minnesota Viking, the Vikings not trading up, I look at this much more as the Patriots were never trading that pick. No matter what the Vikings offered, Drake May was too good of a quarterback prospect for the New England Patriots to pass, because they are a franchise that has always had franchise quarterbacks since the beginning of the 90s with Drew Bledsoe and Tom Brady. And they took kind of a middling quarterback prospect in Mac Jones. It blew up in their face. So they are looking for the guy who can compete with the Josh Allens in the AFC, the CJ Strouds. They know that you're going to need somebody like that, and they were never going to trade with the Vikings. I'm sure that there will be some reaction that's, well, the Vikings didn't do enough. They didn't make a big enough offer. I look at it as they clearly were just not able to pull the Patriots off of a great quarterback prospect, and everything was just pointless smoke screening or not wanting to give away to the fans, as the league tells them, not wanting to give away what they were going to do. And so you don't end up with an opportunity to take Drake May. Personally, I look at this as not that shocking. I thought that it was in the range of outcomes that New England could look at it like we need a roster. Instead, they don't. They pick their quarterback. And now the Vikings are in a position where it will be a little more tested about we're in love with multiple quarterbacks. Which quarterback is it that you're in love with? Are you really in love with JJ McCarthy? Are you more in love with Michael Pennix than JJ McCarthy? There's a scenario where they trade up a lot to 5 and get McCarthy, or wait till maybe 7 to see if the Giants take him. Their comfort with the rest of this draft class is going to be put to the test over the next, 45 minutes or so as we go through these picks. So now Arizona's pick is in, and we assume that this is going to be a wide receiver. This is another situation, by the way, that it never felt like Arizona, despite, again, them saying, oh, look, we'll trade out. It's fine. We're open for business, whatever. That just a note for the future. It seems like that's just what everybody's going to say. But when you have a prospect of the caliber of Marvin Harrison Jr., someone who is considered maybe the best receiver prospect since Julio Jones, you just can't pass that up if you're Arizona, especially when they did a full tank last year and now they need to, and sent out DeAndre Hopkins, sent out Marquise Brown. Like, they need to bring in a superstar wide receiver, whether it is Neighbors or if it is Harrison Jr. I assume it's Harrison Jr. So the Vikings now are in a position potentially to trade up to number 5. And if they really love JJ McCarthy, they should be able to offer enough to get the Chargers to move back, because the Chargers have their quarterback already. And there's been weird things that people have tried to sell as far as rumors regarding, Justin Herbert. But obviously the reason that Harbaugh went to the Chargers was because he's got a franchise quarterback already there in place. So why would he move that franchise quarterback? No, he wants to get everything he can around that franchise quarterback so he can win, starting with receiver, starting with offensive line. But with the Chargers, they could pick as well with this selection if they want Malik Neighbors instead, as Goodell's up there announcing the pick as we speak here. And the selection, no surprise, is Marvin Harrison Jr. to the Arizona Cardinals. Again, a lot of conversation. We'll move out for the right price. For these top 4 picks, they were so clear and obvious that it appears that none of these teams were remotely serious about ever trading out. So the Vikings didn't have the opportunity. And yes, I saw some of you in the comments talking about this. We will think about it for years with Josh Dobbs and winning those games. We will 100% think about for many, many years to come the impact of that, good or bad, Because imagine if Drake May doesn't work out, as, I don't know, Akili Smith didn't once upon a time when quarterbacks went 1, 2, 3, and the 11th pick, Dante Culpepper, turned out to be a great quarterback. We're going to talk about that impact, though, because had the Vikings fallen apart entirely after Kirk and lost every game from there, what would the situation be? Would it have still been the same? I don't know. That 3 quarterbacks were going 1, 2, 3, no matter what. And I think that there will be some reaction, though, tonight where people will assume that there was an opportunity and the Vikings didn't take it. And I don't buy that. I think that they were willing to put on the table, that they were willing to put on the table whatever it took, right? I mean, whatever it took to get Drake May, and they were not going to do it. That's just how I'm viewing this, no matter what they were putting down. So you can blame Kirk Cousins beating the 49ers. You can blame Josh Dobbs winning a couple of games at total random. You can blame them not tanking and sending out Hunter and letting go of Kirk Cousins and trading him before last year. But I don't believe that you can blame them for not offering enough, because every indication was that they were willing to put a lot on the table to move up to the New England Patriots, but it just wasn't going to be enough. So here we sit with the Los Angeles Chargers on the clock, a team that would make a lot of sense for the Vikings to trade up. Jonathan Harrison is furiously scrolling Twitter for any signs that that's going to happen. So, but we'll wait and see if we get a Schefter report, but we have not. The last couple picks, we got a very fast Schefter report that those teams were going to stay and pick. We have not yet gotten a Schefter tweet that says that the Chargers are going to stick and pick. So they may be considering moving out of this. And if they do stay and it's, say, Malik Neighbors, then it comes down to the Giants and their love for McCarthy. Do the Giants love him enough, or do they not? And the Vikings could move up to number 7, potentially number 8. That would be juicy if they moved up with the Atlanta Falcons, and then the Falcons had the Vikings former quarterback, and the Vikings traded with them for number 8. I mean, that could certainly be very interesting, but so far, I mean, we're counting down here, and we have not had news of a move for the Vikings to trade up with the Los Angeles Chargers. So that may mean that they're going to stick and pick as well, and that everybody who talked so much with the media about how, oh, well, we're going to make a trade, ended up sticking and picking. So do we have some news here? Is there some news that the Chargers are going to trade? What do we got, Jonathan? You may be muted. There you go.
There's no news yet on whether the Chargers are trading yet. Ian Rappaport's tweet reported that both the Giants and Vikings made significant offers, one last offer before the Patriots took their pick, but obviously the Patriots didn't accept that. But that does keep in mind that the Giants did offer, so they clearly are interested in a quarterback still.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. So there you go. The Vikings tried to trade up with the New England Patriots. So did the Giants. And if they wouldn't have traded with either team, both teams who had tremendous amounts of draft capital, then we've got our answer. Our answer was, from the start of draft season, they fooled everybody into thinking it was possible, and they ended up instead just taking Drake May. But now we've got now the Schefter report. The Chargers are keeping their pick. Oh boy. Now it gets interesting. The Chargers are keeping their pick, which means that JJ McCarthy's availability comes down to the New York Giants. And if he does not go to the Giants, could the Vikings trade up to number 7? Or could the Vikings just wait and see? If they have an evaluation that is close between Michael Pennix and JJ McCarthy, who does that come down to? If they get to number 11, which one do they like more? Do both guys get there? Or would they let Denver trade up over them? Or the Raiders trade up over them because they're comfortable with both? Or do they have a player between those two that they are way ahead on, and now they're going to be trying to trade up to number 7? But this is going to be kind of the make or break moment here when it comes to JJ McCarthy. If the Giants pick JJ McCarthy, then the Vikings are going to be left between Michael Pennix and Bo Nix. I mean, that could happen. Or if the Giants were doing all of this research on this quarterback class, and by the way, Jonathan mentioned that they tried to trade up to get Drake May. So was this for the Giants a Drake May or nothing? Or was this for the Giants, Drake May or JJ McCarthy? Or is the JJ McCarthy hype just not even real and the Vikings will get him at number 11? Or Michael Pennix, whoever they like more? We are starting to find out. At very least, here's what we know, that everybody who mock drafted the Vikings trading up to 4 or 5 to get JJ McCarthy did not succeed in that. That 4 quarterbacks did not go 1, 2, 3, 4. So we'll keep history at bay there. And now we're going to find out what McCarthy's draft stock really was, as opposed to people thinking that it was the number 4 or number 5. With the Chargers, I don't know who they're picking. The pick is in. We'll see here in a second. I've thought that either a great lineman or a wide receiver, Malik Neighbors, would make so much sense here for the Chargers. They need a number 1 wide receiver for their guy. They lost Keenan Allen this offseason. They traded him away. My opinion between Pennix and Nix, I have always preferred Michael Pennix. I will argue about Bo Nix if we want to have the debate that, look, if KOC likes him, then that's the guy. But I have felt like Michael Pennix is well prepared for the NFL, and that when we talk about going up against in the future, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, these are playmaking quarterbacks. That's not Michael Pennix, but he has something that does work to his advantage. That is his arm, that his strong arm and his willingness to push the ball down the field, his ability to throw with anticipation, his leadership and command of his offense from what we saw in college. All of that says you can win with that. And you know who that reminds me of is really Jared Goff. It's very similar, I think, in my mind, to Jared Goff, that it's going to be a pocket quarterback. It's not going to be a playmaker, but you can win from the pocket in the NFL, as we've seen from the Rams, as we've seen from the Lions, and even the Cincinnati Bengals. That the Cincinnati Bengals with Joe Burrow win from the pocket. I don't think you have to be a running quarterback. Now, Michael Pennix runs a 4.5, so he could probably scramble a little bit better than you think. This is, wow, how about this? This comes from Adam Schefter just now. Says, in recent weeks, both the Patriots and the Vikings reached out to the Chargers to see if there was any interest in trading for Justin Herbert. A flat no is what they received. So, hey, they saw your tweets. They saw all your tweets that said we should trade for Justin Herbert, and they checked in, and the answer was no, you're not getting Justin Herbert. So there you go, confirmed that they were never going to trade away the reason Jim Harbaugh went there, which is the franchise quarterback. So, all right, Roger Goodell at the podium now for, hey, how about this? Local connection, Joe Alt, offensive lineman, Notre Dame. You know what I got to say? If you weren't doing trades in your mock draft, which most of the PFF simulations did not do trades for other teams, you're doing really well, because these top 5 picks have gone pretty chalky with no trades happening. So now we're here. Now we're at the pivotal moment. We had pivotal moment number 1, which was Washington going Jaden Daniels. Pivotal moment number 2, which was the Patriots swatting off the Minnesota Vikings and the New York Giants and saying, no, you will not trade up for Drake May. He's our Drake May. All right. Then we get to the Cardinals. Not shocking that the Cardinals would take the wide receiver. The Chargers, another moment of, will they actually do it? Will they actually make the trade back with the Vikings? They said no. And they decide to go with their offensive lineman. This man is a beast. Good idea for Jim Harbaugh to get an offensive lineman. And now here we are with the New York Giants. This will determine maybe everything for the Minnesota Vikings, which is, if they take JJ McCarthy, now we're going to be looking at Pennix or Nix at number 11, or maybe even having to trade up because you've got Denver behind you. You've got the Raiders behind you. You might have to go to number 7. And I do know that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and the general manager from the Titans, Rand Carthon, I believe they have a relationship. There's a San Francisco connection there. So there may be something that they can do to move up to number 7. But are they going to be doing it to get JJ McCarthy, or would they be doing it just to fend off Denver to make sure that they get Pennix or Bo Nix? And why would the Vikings be interested in Justin Herbert? Seems pretty straightforward to me. I know he's expensive, but he's also excellent. And there have been times where I've wondered, like, is he really great or is he just good? But he's super stupid talented. And if you were talking about bringing him here and putting him with Justin Jefferson, I don't care how much those two cost. That's a good idea. So you can see why they checked in. The Chargers had no interest. They knew they were going to go with their guy. They get Joe Alt. Good job by the Chargers. Get the best offensive lineman. Not a sexy pick, but one that's going to help them rebuild. Now, as far as the goal to save cap space at quarterback, well, your goal is to get a great quarterback. And what you're trying to do is get a great quarterback who does save you cap space. But if you get a great quarterback with a great offensive setup, then you can manipulate the heck out of the cap and try to win the Super Bowl in your Super Bowl window. Herbert is up there where if he's playing for a franchise that had any competency, he would probably be on that same list as someone like, I wouldn't put him with Mahomes or Allen necessarily, but the next wave of those quarterbacks. So yes, they tried to at least make that phone call to see. Now, here we are with the Giants. If they take JJ McCarthy, it comes down to 2 quarterbacks. What a lot of you will say, I'm absolutely certain, is that they blew it and they're settling and typical Vikings. I am asking you to refrain from that because, number one, we don't know how these quarterbacks are going to turn out. There have been plenty of times where there's the number 5 quarterback, but also 2, there doesn't seem to have been an opportunity to make this happen. If they wanted to, then there was just not a chance to do it because everybody wanted to stick and pick. They all treated this like it was a draft sim on PFF where it just picks all the players rather than doing the trades. So let's see if JJ McCarthy's draft stock was as high as we actually thought it was, according to the draft industrial complex, the mock draft universe, and so forth. We're going to find out in just seconds here whether the Giants wanted that or if all along, now I had thought all along that they would maybe do it for Drake May, but otherwise that they want to prove that Daniel Jones as extension was the right idea. So a lot of you are saying it's neighbors. My TV is just a little bit behind some of your televisions. It happens sometimes with me and the wife if we're in different rooms. The TVs don't match up. So here we go. We're going to get Roger to the podium here in just a second. But if they're picking neighbors, then that means that McCarthy stock was not as high as everyone said. And it also means that now it's going to come down to whether it is Malik Neighbors indeed of LSU. So the Giants had their chance. They had their opportunity to take JJ McCarthy with their own pick with no trade up. So this says right here that the draft stock of JJ McCarthy was not as high. And now there could be a chance for the Vikings to get him even at number 11 without giving up their pick, or maybe take Michael Pennix because potentially they like him more. And I think some of you are right. And this is why it's so hard to believe things during draft season, because the Giants would have every reason to want the Vikings to think they were going to take McCarthy. Oh yeah, trade up everything, give up all your draft picks, right? Of course they would try to deke somebody in the NFC into trading up all of their draft picks to try to get over them. Of course they would. But instead, the Vikings did not do it. And now also, by the way, the Vikings look smarter for not trading up with the Chargers and rather leaving it to the Giants and saying, we dare you to do it. We dare you to do it. If it comes down to McCarthy and Pennix, I prefer Pennix. But either one is still a good choice. Either one is still a high quality. These are the 2 quarterbacks that were in the national championship game. Hard to argue. Hard to argue against it. You know what I need? Need a little Diet Dr. Pepper right now. Been talking for an hour and a half here without a sip of Diet Dr. Pepper. Let's talk amongst yourselves for a second. We needed to get past that Giants pick so I could take a deep breath here. Although the Vikings could be trading up at any moment because this is where they could try to get ahead of Denver. Hold on. I'm going to take a sip of this. Whew. Got some drama. We have some drama here, folks. Isn't this exciting? I know all you guys are losing your minds, but this is fun. This is fun. This feels like, I have the same feeling when I cover a game at US Bank Stadium. It's so intense there, right? There's so much noise throughout the game. And every single game comes down to a final field goal or drive because it's the Vikings. So that's how it works. And in the fourth quarter, you're always gripping the desk, right? I'm trying to write. I always write an instant game reaction and my fingers aren't moving right because it's just tense and it's loud and you're anxious. What's going to happen, right? That's the same exact way that everybody feels right now. It's the fourth quarter of a playoff game and you're driving down the field. What's going to happen? So at least by process of elimination, we are down to 3 out of the 6 projected quarterbacks. Each one of them has a good case for becoming a quality Minnesota Vikings quarterback. They all do. People will have their opinions. That's what makes this fun. I think that if you are against their pick, you should work a little harder than just calling them the guy from 2011, that you should flesh it out, talk about it. But this situation is one that we talked about many times where, hey, the Giants didn't take McCarthy. The other teams decided to stick and pick. And now it's number 7 for the Tennessee Titans. Do the Vikings believe here, as the clock is clicking down, do they believe that they have to make a trade up to fend off Denver or to fend off the Raiders? Or are they okay with the idea that Denver or the Raiders could trade up ahead of them? Are they okay with that? Because if they are okay with that, then they could sit at 11. And as it goes longer here, as the pick is now in for the Tennessee Titans, as we go on, it gets more and more likely that the Vikings will not have to give up anything to get their quarterback. And because when you get to number 8, that seems like that could be Dallas Turner. And then, you got number 9, Roma Dunze. Like, this is kind of playing out, right? Like a draft that has no trades whatsoever and all hell is not breaking loose in the way that it was talked about so much. And if the Vikings end up getting, and I've been more skeptical than almost anybody on JJ McCarthy, if they pick him at 11, wow. Considering what they were talked about with the idea they might have to give up 3 first-round picks to swap with someone in order to get JJ McCarthy. And now we are looking at dead in the face the very distinct possibility that they will pick whichever quarterback they like at number 11, which would be a very favorable outcome. I agree with Carl in the comments, though. Chicago at 9 could trade with Denver. Are the Vikings afraid of that, though? If they have the same grade on JJ McCarthy and Michael Pennix, would they let Denver move up and make that trade with Chicago if they wanted to? They might. Or they might feel like, and oh man, the tangled webs we weave if they trade with the Atlanta Falcons. I guess there would be no hard feelings for tampering. Hey, by the way, real quick, while we got a second, the pick is in. It looks like it's going to be a lineman. Real quick, allow a little snark here. I thought the Vikings were getting the 8th overall pick. I thought they were what? Why didn't that happen, everybody? Why didn't Roger Goodell walk up there and announce that he was penalizing Kirk Cousins for texting with a receivers coach? Who sold that heap of crap? That was one of the silliest stories I think that I saw during all of draft season. Total nonsense that they were going to switch first-round draft picks with the Vikings over tampering. They don't care about tampering at all. They're going to dock a 4th round pick in 2029 for the Falcons when everyone's forgotten about it. Are you serious? Who the heck was putting that out there? Total nonsense. Just we've got time. Also, I'm still wondering where all the mock drafts are that had JJ McCarthy as the 4th overall. Well, we're snarking. Shocking that mock drafts would be wrong. Actually, though, I will say this year, at the very top of the draft was probably, in hindsight, as predictable as it's ever been, because how rare is it that you have 3 quarterbacks that's going to be at the top? I mean, that almost never happens. I will save the big nobody knows nothing rant for later, but I just wanted to point out that was such a silly story. It was also silly, the idea that Justin Herbert would get traded. But I do credit the Vikings for at least picking up the phone and being like, could you please, what do you think about just giving us your franchise quarterback? And they said, no, obviously. But now the Vikings not trading with the Titans, and the pick is in here. They're going to draft, I imagine, when we come back from, Eric, that's not true. That is not true. A lot of people thought that the Vikings were going to get this pick swap. That was put out there by large accounts on Twitter. Let's just call it that. And I got a lot of questions about it. I got questions about it every single night. Are they going to swap picks? Are they going to swap picks? No, because that's insane and would never happen. Anyway, so the pick is in here for the Titans. Now we're talking about Atlanta. Do the Vikings call Atlanta and say, hey, no hard feelings for your tampering? In fact, actually kind of thank you, because that's a lot of cap space that we don't have to pay for a 36-year-old broken quarterback who has 1 playoff win. But maybe they don't mention that part as they're making the trade call. So they call up Atlanta and say, how about we just take the number 8 pick? You get 11, then you get to have a defensive player at number 11. We get to get our quarterback at number 8. It seems realistic. All right. So now finally the Titans pick is in. Carl, large accounts on Twitter is, if you don't know, then you can go find the information yourself if you want for who was putting it out there. But I'm just not going to talk about that person. So anyway, it's JC Latham, fat guy. Good for you, Titans. You're going to have to run the ball without Derrick Henry now. That Titans team is a wreck. Their offensive line was one of the worst in the league. I am actually curious, by the way, with the Titans, if Will Levis does have a chance at some point to be a good quarterback, because I know for a fact that the Vikings, well, because they didn't pick him and more, had no interest whatsoever in Will Levis last year. So they passed on him rather than just taking a shot. And now they're going to try to rebuild around him, starting with an offensive lineman. Just doesn't seem like Levis is going to get much of a shake, though, with that team. There's nothing to work with there. Treylon Burks. I mean, what else? Now an offensive lineman's in the top. They are years away, especially in that division. That's going to be pretty tough. Oh, I'm sorry, Carl. My mistake. You meant that the account was nonsense. Okay. Yeah, I got you. My apologies. When I'm mid-rant, it's pretty hard to slow down that train. So anyway, I'm just still laughing at that idea that anyone thought that they were going to swap the picks a day before the draft. No, that's not what's going to happen. Anyway, here's the Falcons. Stick and pick is just becoming way more realistic because the pick is in for the Atlanta Falcons. So now you have number 9 is going to be Chicago. Why would Chicago trade out? All right. I mean, Chicago could pick Roma Dunze. He's still on the board. Every defensive player, we have not had a single defensive player, if you're Chicago, that, you could take anybody you want. Byron Murphy, Dallas Turner, the Falcons the same way here. They could take anybody they want. They could take a defensive player, and then it will go to Chicago, and we're going to see. Wait a minute. The Atlanta Falcons are taking Michael Pennix? Oh my God. What? Are you serious? Jonathan, are these people, are you serious?
Albert Breer is reporting that the Atlanta Falcons are taking Michael Pennix Jr. with the number 8 pick. Wow.
What?
The first big draft
What?
shot. One of the biggest draft shocks of the night. Absolutely wild.
JJ McCarthy or Bo Nix? I am completely shocked. That means that they want Michael Pennix to sit on the bench for 2 years behind Kirk Cousins. I'm at a bit of a loss, folks. I am at a bit of a loss. I understand why. Now, I'm not shocked that Michael Pennix went ahead of JJ McCarthy. I am not shocked at all. You know why? Because draft analysts told you there was no way. So then I knew it was possible. Because no mock draft had that. That's how I knew it could happen. Because as usual, they got the quarterback order wrong because they always do. But Michael Pennix going to the Atlanta Falcons is truly incredible. And I have to say, I mean, you guys are saying, is it part of a trade? Now, okay, maybe it's part of a trade. It doesn't seem like it though. If the Atlanta Falcons, that would be like an NBA thing. If the Atlanta Falcons took Michael Pennix to trade him to the Vikings, that would really be crazy, but we've never seen that before. They usually just trade picks. So they want Michael Pennix. And that means that they think that Michael Pennix can be their future franchise quarterback after Kirk Cousins. But what in the blue hell are they doing? I mean, they just signed Cousins to $100 million. I'm sorry, I'm laughing. Pennix will be 45 years old before he plays. You're not wrong, Tom. You're not wrong. If you are Michael Pennix, you got to be completely baffled that they are not just taking one quarterback at $100 million, but then also drafting one with a top 10 draft pick, which does not help Kirk Cousins win. Wow. Of all the scenarios, this is why we draft. This is why we really do the draft, because of all the scenarios, all the draft sims, all the mock drafts, all the things that I thought that I knew. I never in a million years would have guessed the Atlanta Falcons would have spent that much money for Kirk Cousins to then draft a quarterback in the top 10. In fact, that's kind of funny because Kirk was that to RG3 almost, right? There was like the RG3 and then Cousins gets drafted. Now Cousins on the team and his old team picks a first round pick. That really means that they think that Pennix can be their future franchise quarterback. They will waste 2 years of his rookie contract or not, because we don't know how well Kirk Cousins and his Achilles are going to hold up. But I am struggling to find the justification for them taking Michael Pennix, aside from just their management really loved what happened with Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love. Could that be the only thing? I mean, I'm looking now at the TV at these reactions and everybody seems confused. I mean, Michael Pennix is smiling, but he's even got to be confused. There is no way that he even saw this coming. And now we are sitting here. I guess Adam Schefter saying it was Raheem Morris was just in love with Michael Pennix. Now it is either JJ McCarthy or Bo Nix. And hey, my scouting turned out pretty good. I'm not even a scout. I liked Pennix more than McCarthy, and that's where they went. Good stuff. Anyway, hey, look, good for Michael Pennix, one of my favorite quarterbacks in the draft. I think he would have been great as a Minnesota Vikings quarterback. I think he would have been a great fit. The way that he played, the leadership that he showed last year, and in a couple of years, he is going to have a chance. And this could be a great situation for him because the offense they're going to play is a Shanahan-inspired type of offense, and that he's very good with play action, so forth. It's just clear that they wanted to draft and develop a quarterback in the same way that so many other teams have not been able to do over the years. So in 2 years, we're going to see Michael Pennix take over for Kirk Cousins, and he's going to have a fully developed type of team with Kyle Pitts, Drake London, and so forth. And this this is shocking, but also knowing that Michael Pennix is worth a top 10 pick and the Vikings not getting him, I think is the first disappointment of the night. Would Tennessee have been willing to trade out? Could they have ever guessed that Atlanta was going to do this? Were the Vikings thinking, oh man, once we get past the Giants, no one else is going to draft a quarterback? And now they do. And they take Michael Pennix, the great Washington left-handed fireballer, who I thought would have been a tremendous pick for the Vikings. This is now the disappointment of the draft for the Vikings, is not getting the actual fourth quarterback off the board, not the alleged, not the presumed. How many times did I say this, by the way, through draft season? Don't assume we know. Don't assume we know the order. Don't assume JJ McCarthy is somebody's actual franchise quarterback. I mean, now, if you're the Vikings, JJ McCarthy falls in your lap, potentially, or you go with Bo Nix. We've heard no Bo Nix connection whatsoever to the Vikings. I don't even know how much that they visited with him. I know they visited a lot with Michael Pennix, and I'm very curious what it looks like in that room right now. But the Bears, the pick is in for the Bears. The Jets are not moving, and the Vikings will pick their quarterback at 11. Now, I think it's a loss to not get Michael Pennix. It is a big loss to not get QB4 when he was almost there. But it is a big win to select your quarterback at number 11 and not have to trade up. And yes, Jeff, you're right. All of us Pennix people were right. The people that thought that Pennix was a better prospect than McCarthy, like myself, were right. That he was drafted higher than JJ McCarthy. But if McCarthy goes to the Vikings, doesn't suddenly mean he's a bad prospect. It still means he's a top 11 pick and a quarterback that they'll be able to develop. It just tells you that all these people saying that McCarthy was clear-cut top 4, no question, were wrong. Well, what do we got happening? What's going on?
Vikings have traded up to number 10.
This
Minnesota
has to be
are on the clock.
Has to be McCarthy, right?
I would imagine so.
This has to be them backing out Denver, backing out the Raiders. So the Vikings trade up to 10. Thank you, Jonathan. All right, here we go. Here we go. Like in Hollywood, they go, action. Action. Here we go. Number 10, Minnesota Vikings. This has to be JJ McCarthy, right? Only trading up for one spot to get your quarterback here is a very big win for the Vikings, especially if they're getting, as Roma Dunze, the most known pick ever, goes to the Chicago Bears. It's a great pick for them. But if the Vikings go to number only 10 from 11, and they barely have to give up anything to move one selection to take their quarterback, they're using a 4th rounder to take their quarterback, assuming that's what they're doing here. I can't see any other choice of what they're doing. They're just trying to make sure that they block out Denver and Vegas from getting their guy. This could be a big win for them if they end up getting their quarterback at number 11. That would be a really, really good way of playing this. I don't think anybody could have seen coming that Michael Pennix was going number 8. Okay. So I don't think that there would have been any way you could have, as the Vikings, sat there and thought, oh yeah, we'll get QB5 because Pennix will be off the board first. No, I mean, not based on any information that was out there did we think that Michael Pennix would go number 8. So that's pretty shocking. But if you still end up with the person that you thought you were going to get by trading up to number 4, I think you have to feel pretty good about the economics of that decision. Now, wait a minute. So they're not moving up one spot? What's happening, Jonathan? What's happening?
Pelissero reporting that the Vikings traded number 11. They traded their 4th and a 5th round to the Jets to move up one spot and get pick 203.
So they did not have to give up 23, but they moved from 11 to 10.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So they're still picking twice in this first round. All right. Okay. So then we're still talking about a defensive player here at 23, and a longer evening for us as we continue to break this one down. The Minnesota Vikings are on the clock, folks. This is what we have been talking about. This is what we've been waiting for. This is what we've been discussing for weeks and weeks and weeks since Kirk Cousins left, and now has a buddy in Atlanta in Michael Pennix that shocked the world with that draft pick. But the Vikings moved up for one reason and one reason only. That is to draft their quarterback. And I'm going to think that it's very likely JJ McCarthy. And that is, it's going to be well played. I mean, if they get the quarterback that everyone had them mock draft move up to number 4 to get JJ McCarthy and had them giving up 11, 23, whatever else. And it's, Jim, it's not stupid, because if the Broncos or Raiders came in with a bigger offer, they would have been able to jump ahead and get a quarterback. Yes, Jonathan.
Want me to spoil the pick here?
Go ahead.
It is JJ McCarthy.
JJ McCarthy. Wow. The Minnesota Vikings land JJ McCarthy with the 10th pick after trading up with the New York Jets just one spot and not giving up the number 23 pick. And as weird as it was to get to this position, as shocking as it was to have Michael Pennix go, of which I will wonder myself for a long time, did they have Pennix or McCarthy higher? I'm sure they'll tell us that it was McCarthy higher. Another team put Pennix higher, and he ends up being QB5. But QB5 was often throughout this draft season placed by the draft analysts and the draft reporters as a top 5 pick, and the Vikings end up getting him with number 10 without giving up 23. I have to say that the biggest concern for the Vikings and the pick with McCarthy for me was always going to be the price. If it cost them multiple picks, first round picks, it would have been really concerning to have to give up that much for a quarterback like McCarthy, who's going to need time to develop and that they are going to need a great team around him. But instead, that is not what happened. They gave up almost nothing. They move up one spot and they get their future franchise quarterback. Now, I will say it is going to take some time with JJ McCarthy. He is going to have to develop, and we're going to have to see this thing come together from the first OTA and minicamp through probably 2025 when he is starting to fully develop as a quarterback. But what we know about JJ McCarthy is that he has won everywhere that he's gone, that he has played in NFL style environment with Jim Harbaugh, that he has a tremendously strong arm, that he has a playmaking ability with his legs, and that the Vikings didn't have to give up almost anything for him. That right there is a big victory for the Vikings. Yes, they landed the quarterback that everybody thought, but not in the way that they thought. And this gives now, I think, a perfect partner, personality-wise, between JJ McCarthy for Kevin O'Connell. Between those two, the perfect partner of someone who is a great communicator, who can execute an offense, who understands the game extremely well, who takes the game very seriously, as you've seen from every article, every feature about JJ McCarthy. And when people talk about him as a Kirk Cousins type, that's kind of odd to me, because he is much more of a playmaking quarterback. He's much more of a natural athlete than Kirk Cousins was. And you saw that in the drills that he did do at the NFL Combine. So the Vikings have their future franchise quarterback in JJ McCarthy. And again, without giving up almost anything. And this has to be a dream scenario for McCarthy to be able to go to Minnesota and have a chance to play with Justin Jefferson and have the supporting cast that he's going to have. But they now have to develop JJ McCarthy. It's going to be a process with him. It won't be plug and play as it might have been with, say, Michael Pennix. And throughout this time, I have wondered about McCarthy. I've wondered about the hype around him, if it was truly real. It turns out yes and no. He was a first-round pick, but he was not a first-round pick that you had to trade up this much for. I am somewhat skeptical about putting a lot of emphasis on certain parts of a quarterback's game that aren't about quarterbacking, that are, hey, he's a great guy, he's a good leader, he won. And for the record, Michael Pennix would have been my choice if both of them were on the board. But here's what I know, that JJ McCarthy and Michael Pennix and Drake May and Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels, they all have about equal odds of succeeding historically. They're all top 10 draft picks. They were all chosen by NFL teams as top 10 draft picks, as the Vikings pick McCarthy at number 10. And the grade for this is the same grade that I told you I would give the moment the Vikings got their quarterback. It's an A. In fact, they didn't give up almost anything. It's an A+, because now, and by the way, I was so close. All week I said my hot take was that they stick and pick at 11, get McCarthy. I was so close. They didn't stick and pick. They did have to trade up, but they've got their guy, and he's going to get every opportunity to succeed. If JJ McCarthy is good at all, he's going to have a great chance to succeed. And that's what we know about this situation. We don't know how he'll develop. We don't know if he is going to, over the next 5 years, become one of the best quarterbacks in the league, if he's going to be a middling quarterback, average quality, if he's going to fall apart and bust. We don't know. We don't know tonight. We won't know tomorrow. We won't know when I report at TCO Performance Center from rookie minicamp. We will not know in year one when he sits for Sam Darnold in week 1 through 7. We won't know about whether JJ McCarthy is going to be that guy that this organization has yearned for so many years since Fran Tarkenton. But what we do know is that the Vikings gave themselves a chance to find that. That's what they did tonight. Gave themselves a chance to find that true franchise quarterback. And that when you put everything around him, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, the 2 offensive tackles, a running back in Aaron Jones, a quarterback coach in Josh McCown, who played for a long time in the league, a head coach as a former quarterback who changed Kirk Cousins, truly changed Kirk Cousins. He instilled confidence in Kirk Cousins that we had never seen before. And that relationship grew over 2 years to the point where, and it took 2 years, to the point where he had complete command of that offense. If JJ McCarthy can get to that point of having complete command of the offense, if he can make plays with his legs, if he can deliver the football where it's supposed to go, and then if he can use his ability to throw on the run, which is excellent, his escape ability, which is very good, scrambling, escaping rushers, he could be a quarterback that the Vikings win with. And throughout this season, draft season, I kept trying to come up with JJ McCarthy comparables. And there were many different names that got thrown around. There was Alex Smith, Matt Hasselbeck, I thought of, and that's going back a little bit, but Matt Hasselbeck was kind of like his size, a little bit of playmaking ability, strong enough arm, tough guy, good leader, so forth. Won a lot of games under the right circumstances with Seattle. The other one that I came up with was Dak Prescott, that, potentially Dak Prescott, can lead a top offense because he throws to the right spot, because he's got a terrific arm, because he's got enough playmaking ability. And even when you see the highlights of JJ McCarthy, he's able to make plays out of structure. Can he win the Super Bowl? I have no idea, because that's going to be determined by a lot of stuff. But what I do know and can say confidently about the Super Bowl part is that they didn't give up anything. They did not have to go up to number 4 and give up 23. So if the formula was always, hey, here's what we'll be happy with. We'll be happy with trading everything for Drake May. We'll be happy with trading nothing for JJ McCarthy because we know we can put other things on the field that will help him succeed. Then they landed one of the 2 ways. It wasn't Drake May because the Patriots were never giving him up. So it's the next best thing. A quarterback with potential, a quarterback who has won, a playmaking quarterback, and an excellent communicator. This is very important that JJ McCarthy is an excellent communicator. That will matter because so is Kevin O'Connell. And they're going to build this offense together. I mean, that is an ideal situation. And also what this means is that Kevin O'Connell met with JJ McCarthy and that he worked with him and he believed in him more than he believed in Bo Nix and more than he believed in clearly Michael Pennix in a trade up, unless they had no idea that Pennix was going 8, which will be interesting to find out. But enough to make this pick. But they also did not freak out. They didn't panic. They didn't trade the farm to the Chargers. They didn't trade the farm to another team that to the Titans even to move up and get McCarthy and essentially got him with their own pick. I mean, I don't care about the 4th rounder. It's, I was suggesting they draft a punter in the 4th round the other day. So not too concerned about that. This is a big win for them. This is their quarterback who is a great fit. I think that 90% of draft analysts who did their content this year put McCarthy with the Vikings because they felt like it was the best pick. Now, the other side of this, there is another side of this, which is the things that I've talked about through draft season. This is somebody who's thrown very few passes, and it's harder to figure out how good someone's going to be when they've thrown fewer passes. And even if he's played with a winning team, his team was much better than everyone else. That's going to change. The Vikings are not much better than everybody else. They're good, but they're not much better than everyone else. So he's going to have to be that much better. He's going to have to grow. He's going to have to develop and become a better version. But there is something that I always noted along the way, which is when we compare the other quarterbacks, where would McCarthy be in a year? Where will he be in 2 years? I mean, that's what you're really betting on here with JJ McCarthy. This is not a 1-year thing, and ownership has to be patient. Fans may have to be patient. It's not hey, you're drafting him for next year. But the fact that they can keep number 23 is so vital. Has there been a defensive player? There has not been a defensive player off the board yet. The New York Jets just took Fashanu, the offensive tackle from Penn State. There has been no defensive player. Poor defensive guys. But you know what this means? At number 23, the Vikings can get a top 10 defensive player. They're almost locked into a top 10 defensive player after these next 2 picks. Now, is Denver going to take Bo Nix? What a fascinating turn of events that the Vikings get their guy at number 10 and now have a chance to draft another player. What do we got?
Just some quick reactions to the JJ McCarthy pick. Our buddy Chris Trapasso tweeting out the picks and his grades after every pick, saying tools are there for him to be a stellar QB, athletic, natural improviser, arm talent, plus accuracy. Some misses will appear. Comes up big in key moments. Young but plenty of experience. Can be quick liftoff with Vikings grade A-. Also put out a poll in the chat among 315 votes right now. I asked him, with how it all played out, do you like the McCarthy pick at number 10? 89% of people say yes, they liked how it played out and the pick.
I am on board with the 89%. And you know why? Because even though throughout the draft season, I did a lot of watching of McCarthy, a lot of talking to people about him. And I always have had some hesitation about the idea of trading up for him. Always wondered if that was really it. Always wondered if he was actually QB4, which he wasn't. It's QB5. But, and you're right, the 11% are always going to be the loudest. That's how life tends to work, is the unhappiest are always the loudest. But I have questions and I have concerns, and we're going to see how that plays out. But I also know that throughout the last how many ever years that I've been doing this, that there have been quarterbacks that I've had concerned about who have turned out to be really good. One of them is Justin Herbert. I didn't think that Justin Herbert would be very good. And, he's turned out to be a really good quarterback. So the college game is just so different than the NFL that you can never really know how someone's going to react to the NFL environment. What I understand about JJ McCarthy, though, is that his maturity and his love for the game as in his dedication to the game sounds like a match with Kevin O'Connell. When I listened to McCarthy at the Combine and he talked with NFL Network and he talked with the media, everything said, this guy kind of reminds me of O'Connell. Just in the way that he handled himself and the way that he talked. And now you also have Josh McCown in there as well. So he is in the hands of two accomplished quarterback minds. McCown playing for a bunch of different teams. McCown already coaching quarterbacks himself. And Kevin O'Connell, who was a quarterback coach, then offensive coordinator, and won the Super Bowl in Los Angeles, and then comes here and works with Kirk Cousins. And the Diet Dr. Pepper got me for the first time tonight. But so he comes here and works with Kirk Cousins. And even though I didn't think that Kirk Cousins was crazy better than he ever was before, he was a different person when Kevin O'Connell was his coach, when he did not have Mike Zimmer breathing down his neck, but also Kevin O'Connell clearly understood how to work closely with his quarterback on a day-to-day basis and be in very close contact with him every single day, like in the office, breaking it down, building the offense together, and then leading the team. And that was what I really saw from Kirk Cousins that did not exist until Kevin O'Connell got here. And that's what's going to be instilled in JJ McCarthy, is the confidence to lead the team. If you can do that, if you can master the offense, you are most of the way there for McCarthy. He's going to have to learn to put some touch on the football. It can't just be all rockets. He is going to have to learn a little bit that, launching the football downfield is going to have to look a little better. His deep passes were not perfect. Throwing to the outside is going to have to be a little better. The footwork is going to have to be adapted and adjusted a little bit better for him at times. But that's everybody, right? It's everybody that is going to have to improve from college to the NFL. The sample size is smaller. That's what makes it harder to know and harder to look at and go, all right, well, look, I can see it because I have 2 years or whatever. But with McCarthy not having that sample, it leaves the door open for a lot of development that can happen at the NFL level. If McCarthy had stayed in college, they don't really develop quarterbacks in college. Instead, he's going to get it with the Vikings and in a position where he is not under a lot of pressure to start right away. And this is going to be our next big discussion, I'm sure, at some point. It's not going to happen right now, but you're going to have to, with JJ McCarthy, I think, be prepared for the idea that he doesn't start week 1 and be okay with that. They paid $10 million for Sam Darnold for that reason. They picked someone who is younger than everybody else. And that means that he is not as far along as everybody else. And it is the job of Kevin O'Connell and it is the job of Josh McCown to work closely with him and develop him into the best quarterback he can possibly be. There's two sides of this. There is the Vikings got their quarterback without having to move majorly up. And then there's how does it get done? How does he get from point A to point B to where you could take these raw skills and make McCarthy into what you want him to be? But the Kwesi Adofo-Mensah part of this, any complaints? I mean, what I called this was the completing of the circle of the competitive rebuild. Right now, it's just competitive. Now it's just off we go, right? There's no more competitive rebuild. It's just time to win, time to develop this quarterback, time to win. Next year is a bit of a transition year for sure, but it's time to be in the direction of winning for the Vikings. It's no more competitive rebuild. You've got your quarterback, off you go. But the way they handled this from start to finish, if I told you that in 2022, as the Denver Broncos pick is in here, and I think I know you guys were leaving in the comments here, but Bo Nix, wow. It was that good. The quarterback class was that good. Wow. 6 quarterbacks in the first 12 picks. That is freaking crazy. And look, everybody gets to be right about their quarterback, at least tonight. If you said Bo Nix was a first-round draft, actually everybody except for the big board people, the consensus big board people were way the hell off on Pennix and Bo Nix. That's not surprising. But if you had an opinion on any of these quarterbacks and you said, I like this guy more than you do, I like this guy more than you do, y'all get to be right. Top 13 picks on every single one of these quarterbacks. That is freaking wild. So what we can't say is, well, they should have done this, they should have done that. They're all taken in the same range, and now we get to see how it plays out. How about that? And you know what? I feel good because I liked all these guys, and I thought I was like out of my mind. This whole time I was saying, well, I kind of, I like Pennix, I like Nix, I like, I like the idea of McCarthy at a certain price. And I was made to feel by the draft analysts like I was nuts for liking Michael Pennix and Bo Nix. Nope, top 15 draft picks. Guess not. But I like being a real reporter, so I'm not going to switch over to draft scouting. Anyway, this is really something, though. We're going to look at this draft class for a long time and break this down about how this played out with Pennix shocking us by going number 8. Bo Nix, absolutely the day one starter. The Vikings having a chance to pick Nix or McCarthy. They go with McCarthy. Interesting choice. Someone they can develop a lot more. The one thing I would say for that is that Bo Nix is much, much older, so it's harder to compare them. I'm sure that we would like to look at, hey, here's Nix, here's McCarthy. They're on two different wavelengths. Clearly, Denver wants their quarterback right away, and the Vikings preferred somebody that they can develop over a couple of seasons. But going back to what I was saying, I just got distracted there by the quarterback who was 38th on the consensus big board going 13th because he was actually a much better prospect than a lot of draft analysts thought. With Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, if I told you day one when he got the job, here's how this is going to play out. He is going to win 13 games his first year, have a rebuilding year the second year. I won't tell you how that happened with an Achilles injury. And in the third year, clear out all this cap space for the future. Extend Justin Jefferson's the next step. Got to get that done. Draft quarterback and acquire another first-round draft pick in the same draft, of which the Vikings are now one pick away from being guaranteed a top 10 defensive player. If that is what I told you, that on day one, they would win more games than they ever won before with Kirk Cousins, have a tough transition year, but draft their quarterback in the top 10, and then have $100 million or whatever it is in cap space to go forward. I mean, how could you ever be down on that? What do we got?
I'm going to spoil the next pick for you just so to continue this conversation you're going on. The Raiders are going tight end and picking Brock Bowers.
There has never been anything like this in draft history.
So they will have a guaranteed top 10 defensive player pick at number 23.
Wow. Top 10 defensive player in the draft to go along with. And look, even if you say, well, that means they weren't as good of prospects, I guess, but there's a historically good wide receiver prospect and 6 quarterbacks. So even if we just took that out of it, you're starting with basically the 7th pick and going to 23. So 23 is like having a top 15 draft pick on defense. This was handled really well. This was handled really well. If the number one option was never going to be Drake May, which it seems that it was not, the number 2 option for everybody was what? JJ McCarthy. But it was mostly JJ McCarthy at 5 or 4. And instead, it ends up being JJ McCarthy at 10. And then they get a top 10 defensive prospect. I mean, you couldn't have drawn it up any better than this. You really could not have drawn it up any better than this if you're Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. And this is where you go back to, we don't know how these draft picks are going to work out, but you're allowed to learn and get better at your job. And so when 2022 draft happens for Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, that was a real maybe learning experience about how to handle the NFL draft. Because tonight it was handled as well as it could have been. They did not panic. They did not freak out. They didn't trade way up when they didn't need to. And now they're going to land franchise quarterback and top 10 defensive player. So I guess, hey, we need to start talking about which defensive player that they are going to get. Personally, Byron Murphy the second would be my pick if I could have anybody. But I think we're going to start to see now. New Orleans, though, could take a tackle here. New Orleans, I think, is almost likely to take a tackle because they are in offensive line hell. Their great offensive line is falling apart. What do we got, Jonathan?
Ian Rappaport is reporting that the Saints are listening to trade offers. So they could move out and not take a tackle or a defensive player.
Trade up and get Dallas Turner? Like, I don't know. Okay, maybe now we're getting greedy here. Now we're getting greedy. But I mean, the players on the board right now are pretty remarkable for the Minnesota Vikings. It's everyone on defense. Quinyon Mitchell, Terrion Arnold, Byron Murphy, Dallas Turner, Leatu Latu. I mean, everyone. Personally, Byron Murphy would be my number one pick. I like Quinyon Mitchell a lot, but Terrion Arnold, I think, is a real Brian Flores type of player. I can't believe how this has played out. I mean, I guess I sort of can, because that was my hot take, was that McCarthy was going to get to 11. He didn't quite get there, but can McCarthy play guard? That had to come up at some point. You know what? That's actually a good point. When you draft JJ McCarthy and you're not pressured to play him right away, you can improve the interior offensive line and have it ready for when he is able to play. The other part of it is that he can run away, and he's a scrambler and a playmaker. And, that's a big part of it. But Terrion Arnold is maybe my favorite pick outside of Byron Murphy. That I think that Murphy is going to go pretty soon at some point here. Dallas Turner, definitely one to go pretty quick. Jared Verse, another one. And if they're able to draft a defensive tackle, then you have this opportunity to move around Andrew Van Ginkel. Right now, Andrew Van Ginkel is basically your edge rusher, and I don't even know who the backup is. Is it Andre Carter? Like, they don't really have much depth for defensive end. They may have added somebody else for depth at defensive. They added somebody else, some other guy, whatever, outside linebacker from the Giants that I'm blanking on right now. But I mean, if you were able to get any of those defensive ends, then you can now move Andrew Van Ginkel around. And Jonathan Grenard's not very old. That means a duo at the edge or a duo of pass rushers. That's pretty attractive. Jihad Ward. Yeah, thank you very much. That was who it was. That's not a difference maker at all. Would I trade up for Murphy? Maybe. It's not a bad idea. Now, what do you have to dip into? Do they have much to dip into at this point? How much could they give up from day 3? Not very much. And they don't have the second round pick for next year. So trading up would be pretty difficult at this point, but would it be great if they could trade up and get Byron Murphy? Oh, 100%. It would be. So now, more likely than not, we're just going to wait here, because there's going to be such a good player on the board that there's no reason not to wait, because you're going to be able to get best player available and be able to get someone really good on the defensive side. So it just looks like this is all going to be really, really well played out. Jackson Powers Johnson is an option. I don't prefer that. I think if you're getting interior linemen, you should probably draft them later and try to develop them, and then use free agency where you could get proven players on the interior. I agree with you guys that if Terrion Arnold is there, I don't know how in today's NFL you can really win without having a shutdown corner. And it doesn't have to be the Darrelle Revis type of shutdown corner. It can even be like what Kansas City had last year. They had just a physical corner who took on the best wide receivers and made their life difficult in L'Jarius Sneed. And they also had Trent McDuffie. Adding to that secondary is very attractive, but also adding to the defensive line is also necessary. Defensive tackle would be my top pick, because when you look at all of the best defensive tackles in the NFL, they're almost all first round picks. The physical element of defensive tackle is so significant for playing that position that you can't just take a guy and hope to develop him. And the other thing is too, that they're hard to get in free agency. They're very, very expensive, and there's usually 1 or 2 per year that come out in free agency, but it's not like there's 5. And so the Raiders end up landing Christian Wilkins, and well, okay, that, then there's nobody else really, a defensive tackle to go out and get. So if you're going to get those guys, usually you have to get them in the first round of the draft. And like that's what they might have to do here. And we'll see if they can. So the Saints pick is in, but number one corner is not a bad thing either. Terry and Arnold, or Quinyon Mitchell too. Quinyon Mitchell was a heck of a playmaker, ran a 4.3 40. Arnold makes more sense to me just because he was such a physical player when you watch him at Alabama. And I did take note of all of these players, these defensive players, in my draft guide for those who subscribe to the newsletter, which if you don't, thank you so much. If you subscribe to the draft guide, then you saw all of the defensive players that I looked at and the possibility that they stay at 11 and 23. And there's just a lot of good ones. Kool-Aid McKinstry is another one. Cooper DeJean is another one from Iowa that's been brought up. But right now we're kind of talking about cream of the crop. We're talking about best of the best because these offensive players keep getting taken. And when you guys talk about, what I wanted before the draft, it was always through the same lens as Kwesi Adofo-Mensah talked about it. It was, I thought that it was very risky to trade up all the way to number 4 for JJ McCarthy. I liked Michael Pennix more than JJ McCarthy. Bo Nix, I thought, was a very realistic pick for the Vikings. He ended up going one pick later. And McCarthy is the one that I have the least amount of a sample size on. So it was always the hardest. There's a lot of stuff that I think he needs to be better at in order to be a franchise quarterback. I wondered why they didn't throw the ball more with him. Of course, all those things don't change. Those questions don't change. But his percentage chance to succeed is very high with JJ McCarthy here. And his ceiling with Kevin O'Connell with this offense is high. Oh my gosh, another offensive player. Oh my gosh. They take Fuaga out of Oregon State. I can't believe this. Indianapolis has to take a defensive player, right? There has never been anything like this. That is just madness that it has been all offensive players. This is playing right into the hands. We're going to find out who's the better quarterback between, Pennix, McCarthy, and Nix were clearly all equal level prospects because that's where they went. That's what was proven to us by the league, that they were all equal. And the Vikings went with the one that they could develop more. Bo Nix is quite a bit older, and you have to wonder how far McCarthy would have gotten in college if he had stayed for 3 more years and stayed with a great team. And maybe he has more raw skill than Bo Nix. And so they wanted to make sure at number 10 that they got their guy. I have questions about all of them. I think we talked about the meters just last night, about the concern meter. With McCarthy, it was the highest because I have the smallest sample size on actually watching the guy play. That doesn't change. It doesn't change that there's possibilities of things I think could go wrong for JJ McCarthy, but let's consider how we got here and that they didn't have to trade up to get him, and that he has long been considered a great fit, a best fit for Kevin O'Connell and their personalities together. So I said from the start that no matter what my opinion was through draft season, I would throw it out on draft night and we start anew, and I would give an A and we move on. And that's what I'm going to do. So I'm sure that there's going to be some of you who kind of come back and say, well, didn't you not love McCarthy? Oh, you're right. Doesn't matter now. He's the quarterback of the team, and I'm going to cover him the same way I would anybody else to see where this plays out. And I can't wait to follow this journey of JJ McCarthy from the first rookie minicamp. Heck, he's going to be here tomorrow at TCO Performance Center to be introduced, and I will be there. And I'm going to be very interested in that. Having a skepticism about something, how good of a prospect is this really, is not hating on the person. So that's just, we sort of, that's how we do it as a society. Oh, I have a question about that. I'm not sure about that. I'm not sold on that. Oh, yeah, you hate the guy? No, I just have questions. I would have had questions about Bo Nix or anybody else. The only one I suppose I wouldn't have is really is really Drake May. If they had traded everything for him, like, okay, well, I don't have the same level of questions I do as quarterback 5, but I don't think that there's any difference in the odds outside of the number 1 pick. The number 1 pick historically has pretty much clearly been, successful more often than not. The number 1 pick. That's where, you got your John Elway, your Andrew Luck. There's been only a couple of busts and they're super notable. So number 1 pick has a higher chance than anybody else because that's the best quarterback in the draft. Past that, though, historically, we've never really known. And one clear determining factor has been that, one clear determining factor has always been the circumstance for a quarterback. And the Vikings are going to give the best possible situation for JJ McCarthy. What's up, Jonathan?
Kirk Cousins' reaction is coming in from the Falcons drafting Michael Pennix Jr. top 10. According to Diana Rossini, the Falcons called Kirk Cousins when they were on the clock to let him know. From what she learned, Cousins understood a QB would be considered, but did not believe his successor would be taken in the first round. I'm told he's a bit stunned, is what she tweeted. Jane Slater also said Kirk Cousins is shocked and disappointed about the pick. Not getting off to a good start in Atlanta.
It's too good. Football is too good. Who would not follow this? This is too, you couldn't write that any better. He is shocked and disappointed. Sorry, Kirk. That's amazing. It's what the draft pick represents. I'm going to need a minute. Oh, boy. What else you got?
Our first defensive player is coming off the board. It is the UCLA defensive end, edge rusher, Laitu Latu.
He's good. Yeah, would have taken him. Yep, he's really good at football. That's a good pick by them. Okay, I will stop laughing about this Kirk Cousins reaction. But I was as shocked as anybody. This is the second time during the show that I have been speechless, and it's usually really hard to get me to stop talking. Ask my wife or Jonathan. He knows that. But this right here, there are twice now the Atlanta Falcons have stopped me in my tracks. First by drafting Michael Pennix, which is a little strange to tell you the truth, because you usually don't think of a quarterback like Michael Pennix as someone that you would draft and develop for 2 years. He's 23 years old. He's going to be 24. He's much more along the lines of a quarterback that you would, I'm sorry, you guys are cracking me up in the comments now. I can't even get through this. Let me try again. All right. So you never would have thought that they would take a guy who's 24 years old as someone that would be a draft and develop. So I could see why Kirk Cousins would be shocked, because I'm shocked. Everyone's shocked. It doesn't make any sense to anybody. Why wouldn't you take Laitu Latu there or some fat guy and just go from there, right? I mean, but instead they decide to pick a quarterback that is going to be the successor to Kirk Cousins. It makes sense from just a philosophical standpoint. But if you're Kirk, you wanted somebody to help you win now, and they didn't do it. They didn't do the thing that we all thought they were going to do, which is get better defense, get a weapon, get an offensive lineman, whatever, to improve his chances to win. They did nothing to help Kirk Cousins' chances to win. Instead, they picked an older quarterback who will take over at age 26, 2 years from now, when clearly they will be moving on from Kirk Cousins. And right from the beginning of the Kirk Cousins era in Atlanta, here's where it gets so good. They already say, we don't believe in you. Kirk Cousins, okay. So Mike Zimmer never believes in him. All right. And then Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell come in and they sign him to the shortest extension that they could. And then they don't sign him to an extension, showing that they don't believe in him. They have another chance to sign him to an extension. They don't. They say they don't believe in him. They could pay him what Atlanta paid him. They said, no way, we don't believe in you. Goodbye. We're going to get JJ McCarthy. And then on draft night, their biggest opportunity to show that they believe in Kirk Cousins by getting a defensive player in the top 10 or getting him another receiver. They could have picked Roma Dunze if they wanted another receiver. They could have picked an offensive lineman. I don't know their offensive line, but maybe a guard or something or a tackle. And instead they pick a older quarterback. So it's very clear that they want only these next 2 years out of Kirk Cousins. And then they want to move on to somebody else. Oh boy. People have asked me, would you do something else? Do you want to be on TV or do you want to be whatever? Why would I do anything but this? This is too good. There's no way that TV would let me just sit and laugh hysterically for like 15 straight minutes at what the Atlanta Falcons have done to Kirk Cousins. And the fact that he told people he's shocked and disappointed is too freaking good, because the guy, the guy sat there and said, yeah, it's all about the dollars, what they represent. I want somebody to fully buy into me. And the Falcons were like, for a minute. Hey, do you think he's going to wear the Dirty Bird chain, or you think he's going to check down like freaking crazy next year? That guy is protecting the Achilles, folks. He's already preparing for the next contract. Kirk's quarterback rating is going to be 128.6, and they're going to go 6-10. Oh, man. It's going to be so good. 4th and 8? No. 1st and 10 check down. 2nd and 9 check down. That guy is going to make sure he plays to his next contract. And you know what? I bet Kirk, the next team, will believe in you. Anyway, so there's a draft going on still. And Leatu Latu, one of my favorite players in the draft, honestly. He goes off the board to the Indianapolis Colts. What a pick for them. I mean, the Colts trying to rebuild their team around Anthony Richardson, and they get the number 1 defensive player in this entire draft. So well done, Indianapolis Colts. They got to feel like they ended up just getting total gold here with this, hitting a home run with the best player on defense, but that means the Vikings can't get him. That's unfortunate. Very productive, tremendous player. So good for them. But the Vikings are still looking at a lot of defensive linemen or corners. They're 2 positions that they need the most. And I guess I've got to try to come up with like a quick defensive player draft board of who would be the most ideal, because there are still other offensive players that could be picked here in the next few picks. But I'm sure that the defensive players are going to start rolling off the board. So who is the ideal? I would begin with Byron Murphy from Texas as the number 1 player that would be my choice here. He isn't the biggest, but he is a terrific pass rusher, dynamic player. He's something that the Vikings haven't had in some time. But also Johnny Newton from Illinois, he's another one that the same exact situation where he's not the biggest, but has awesome production, can get after the quarterback. And that just has not been a part of what the Vikings defense has had for quite some time. Sheldon Richardson came back in 2021, wasn't the same. 2020, nothing in the defensive line. 2019, remember they argued that in 2019 that Shamar Stephen was the big technical or something they called him, and he was supposed to have some magical impact that we couldn't see, according to Andre Patterson. Well, we definitely never saw it, and there was no impact there in the middle of the defensive line. 2018, Sheldon Richardson was really good, kind of inconsistent though, so he'd be great one week, kind of a no-show the next week. That just was not maybe ideal for the defensive tackle, but it really hasn't been since Sharif Floyd. We're going on 9 years. The big fundamental, that's what it was, not the big technical. The big technical is Draymond Green. but that didn't matter, right? There was no impact. There was no, when the quarterback came to the line of scrimmage, he didn't look right across from him with terror. And that has not happened since really Sharif Floyd was a budding star in the league and then had the injury issues. Tom Johnson was a rotational player, but he was a really good one in 2017. Of course, it helped that Linval Joseph was having an amazing year in 2017 that boosted Tom Johnson. And after that, the defensive tackle position just has not been the same whatsoever. They could use that for this defense. And I mean, it's a 3-4 in its sort of base, I guess, but not really. They play a lot of nickel. They play a lot of 4 down. Sometimes they use 3 guys in the middle, then the 2 outside linebackers. So it's more of a 5-man defensive line. They've got that. And you guys are right that they could potentially trade back. I would not want to see that, though. Would not want to see would not want to see them trade back. Because the player that they're going to get is of such good caliber that if you trade back, I know it does help you get more draft capital, but we've kind of been through that. When you can get someone who can be really good, just take that guy. Don't screw around. Don't get cute. Don't trade out of that pick. Unless, I mean, you go back to 25, that's fine. As we're kind of slowly approaching that, Seattle's pick is in at this point. If you go back just, a couple of picks, okay, that's all right. But I would rather them just stick at 23 and decide to do it. So Byron Murphy would be my first choice. Johnny Newton has been talked about by some people as a first round pick and others as maybe more of a second rounder, but back end of the first round is good with me. It's just such a high impact position. We're also staring potentially in the face Jared Verse and Dallas Turner being on the board. And both of them are very productive defensive ends. I really like the idea of the Vikings pairing someone with Jonathan Grenard. Sorry, there's so many JJs and Jordans and Jonathans. Jonathan Grenard. I like the idea of Jared Verse and Jonathan Grenard on either side, but you can almost sell me on anything here because cornerback is a massive need. And that has not been filled in a long time either. Xavier Rhodes in 2017 is the last great cornerback play the Vikings had outside of 2022. Patrick Peterson probably went underrated because of how bad the defense was. But Patrick Peterson had a really good year. And honestly, I'm not even kidding. The third best cornerback performance that the Vikings have had since Xavier Rhodes is probably Duke Shelley in 400 snaps when he got all those pass breakups and interceptions. That's how bleak it's been. Mike Hughes struggled, and Holton Hill, they tried to run out there for a little bit. That didn't work out. They've drafted corners. The Cam Dantzler thing was there for a minute. They got a half a season out of Cam Dantzler. So if they go Terry and Arnold, Quinyon Mitchell, you want Chop Robinson, I could definitely see Chop Robinson. Talk about a high ceiling guy. Robinson, he was one that was interesting because he didn't have crazy production as far as sacks, but he really had a ton of pressures, which usually is a better indicator of what someone's going to do in the future than sacks. So, there's a lot of really good players here. This is actually what happens when all offensive players are taken in the first 15 is you can make very strong arguments for a bunch of different players, but Byron Murphy, Terry and Arnold are at the top of my list. You can talk me into the other guys though, because if you like Chop Robinson, all right, well, that certainly is a position of need for them. I mean, how many positions wouldn't make any sense? Receiver. I know there's been some of you that want a 3 deep situation. That would be pretty crazy if they went with Brian Thomas or Xavier Worthy or something. I did no prep on wide receivers in the first round. I got to tell you the truth. An offensive lineman, that's something that Kevin O'Connell could, talk about, wanting to do. So what do we got? Do we got some movement happening here, Jonathan?
The latest pick right now looks like Seattle is going to go Byron Murphy, defensive tackle from Texas.
Wow. Well, there goes
Nothing
the,
yet
well,
on
there
trades.
goes the guy I just spent a bunch of time on, but Johnny Newton's still there. And now, so Daniel is saying in the comments, so the Vikings are on the clock. Are we seeing something there? Are they moving up?
Alec Lewis saying back on the clock, trading with the Jaguars. So,
Oh, wow. Look at
looking
this.
into what they are getting
Look
or
at
what they're
this.
trading away for.
Look at this. So clearly they have a defensive player that they really, really want. Is that
All
going to
right.
be Dallas Turner?
So Field Yates saying the trade is pick 7 or 4 pick 17. The Vikings are giving up 23, 167, a 2025 third, and a 2025 fourth.
Spencer
move up
Rattler is
5
the
spots.
funniest answer by far. By far. Dan, thank you for that. That's funny. That's very funny. So they're giving up not a lot to be able to move up a couple of spots here, right? 23, 167. Oh, okay. That's almost nothing.
And a third.
In fact, it shortens my day on Saturday. That's what I'm looking for here. I played golf today and I liked it, so I might do it again. Could be Dallas Turner. Could be Terry and Arnold. Could be Quinyon Mitchell. I mean, there's so many defensive players here that I honestly have no idea. We knew who the quarterbacks were, but we don't know who it's going to be here at number 17. What we do know is that they really want this person. And yes, you guys are right. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is indeed cooking. Normally, a tagline like that, I don't really go for, but in this case, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has managed this draft. And this is why when Kwesi Adofo-Mensah botches the 2022 draft, we go, hey, like, that's one draft. If he's going to be the GM for a while, let's see more. Let's see more picks. Last year, they get Jordan Addison. They get Mekhi Blackman. They get some players to work with. And now they get their franchise quarterback and move up and get whom we will find out soon as they trade up with the Jacksonville Jaguars, just a couple of spots and not having to give up a whole heck of a lot. Is it going to be a defensive lineman? Is it going to be a corner? You could get the best corner, Dallas Turner. Is it going to be Dallas Turner? That's what, is that what Albert Breer is saying?
That's what Alec Lewis is saying, is that he believes it is going to be Dallas Turner. Scrolling up on the Twitter feed, and Albert Breer is saying they are taking Dallas Turner.
Holy cow.
There you go. What a first round.
What a first round. Wow. What a first. And to make sure that they moved up a couple of spots to get an edge rusher. So now we're looking at someone that was expected to go in the top 10, but Atlanta went crazy. So he didn't go in the top 10. He drops into the later part, but is still one of the top defensive players off the board. So this is the third defensive player off the entire board that the Vikings have landed. You get your quarterback for Kevin O'Connell. You get your Alabama edge rusher who was highly productive for Brian Flores. Now, if we go through the Vikings defense, now it's looking pretty good. Now they still need a shutdown corner. They still need the defensive tackle I ranted about for sure. But getting now another edge rusher, you have Jonathan Grunard, 12 sacks last year. Andrew Van Ginkel for the next couple years is a versatile player that has worked well with Brian Flores. Josh Metellus is a piece. Ivan Pace is going to be a piece for them for a long time. And now you have probably Cam Bynum will be extended at some point. And now you add a edge rusher here that was dominant on one of the best defenses in the country. He crushed the NFL Combine. He's got everything. Stand-up rushing, flexibility, speed, everything. Dallas Turner has everything that, and they're even showing on TV some of his dropping in coverage and playing a versatile role, which will help with Brian Flores as well. To be able to get the franchise quarterback and also land the third best defensive player, I don't know how you could give this anything less. You give me your grades. How could they not be an A or an A+? How could they not be? I never would have expected this. I thought that they maybe could get a very good defensive player, but clearly they thought that Dallas Turner was going to go off the board pretty quickly. So they end up with a great defensive player. and the Vikings draft ends in 2024 with JJ McCarthy and Dallas Turner, or first round of the Vikings draft ends, unless they are trading next year's first into the first round too, which is why we'll stay on the air. But this is one hell of a draft for the Minnesota Vikings. And now we restart the clock on the reaction to the Vikings draft. Restart it again. Like I was saying, in Hollywood, restart it again, because we have to go back to the front of the line and react again. Wow. So let's talk about Dallas Turner. I mean, a tremendous talent, a star rusher at Alabama, a highly productive player, has all of the skill of someone who becomes a double-digit sack type of player. As far as his athleticism, his quickness, his production in college, where he went to college. I mean, everything that you could have asked for. I thought that Dallas Turner was going to be the first defensive player off the board in the top 10. I never even thought that the Vikings had a chance to land Dallas Turner. And yet here we are with him as the Vikings' 17th overall pick. So they trade twice. And to be able to do this for Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, to swing this trade and get Dallas Turner and not sit at 23 and wait as all the defensive players went on a run off the board. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has hit this out of the park. In fact, this entire offseason can be thought of right now. It's over now. I mean, day 3, we'll break it down. Day 2, I don't know. You guys going to hang out? Anybody want to hang out tomorrow? We got no draft picks, so anybody wants to play golf, we can. But this is pretty much it. The other guys will be drafted on day 3. We'll take a look at them, and then we'll see if any of them make the team and so forth. But the word Nolan used in the comments, culmination. This is a culmination. It is a culmination of 3 years of this coming together for Kwesi Adofo-Mensah on this night. For the Minnesota Vikings to plan going into this offseason to draft a quarterback, and then to do it without having to move up more than one spot, without having to give up their additional first-round pick, and then at the right moment, striking to move up again to take one of the best players on the board. One of the best defensive players in this entire draft is nothing short of an incredible draft by Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. An A+, an absolute A+. I mean, I honestly am pretty stunned that they were able to get Dallas Turner. He was one of my favorite players to watch in college football this year. I assumed that he was being taken by Dallas, I'm sorry, not Dallas, but his name is Dallas, by Atlanta at number 8 overall. That was the most mocked thing probably in the entire mock universe outside of the quarterbacks, that Dallas Turner would be taken all the way up in the top 10, and he ends up as a Minnesota Viking at 17. They have now put together in a short period of time a team that by next year, and this is going to be a bit of a transition season for them, but by 2025, a developed Dallas Turner, a developed JJ McCarthy, this today is officially now completely, wholly the team of Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell. This is no longer any remnants of Rick Spielman and Mike Zimmer. This is Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell's team. And as we look at it, and as we look at what they have to work with going forward, and we know it's going to be an uphill battle against the other teams in the NFC. We talked about that earlier. But as we look at it, from what they have on paper right now, the bones of a roster right now that belongs to them, with work to be done in the future with the cap space that they have. But this is a premium position that at its best makes $30 million a year, that they just drafted the second best edge rusher off the board. How many times would you ever get the second best edge rusher off the board, even at number 10 overall? And instead they get him at number 17, because that's just the way that the cookie happened to crumble for this year. For them to pick this season to do this offseason, to bring this all together, was extremely well played. This was plotted out and executed. And then they took advantage of their moment. I'm sure they were surprised that Michael Pennix went where he went, but they took advantage of their moment. They traded up to number 10 at the right time. They took advantage of their moment knowing that past number 17, Dallas Turner, was not going to be there. And for a lot of people, he was the number one edge player on the board. And they move up to be able to get him. This is better than what I thought could have possibly happened. So, I am a little bit surprised by it playing out as well as it did. And this is also why throughout this time that I continually tried to say that, look, I mean, we're going to have to be patient. We're going to have to let it play out. We're going to have to let Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell bring together their entire plan. And then we can judge it. Now we can judge it. Now we can look at the roster and judge it. Looks pretty damn good. This night for them looks pretty damn good. The entire roster right now, if we go through it, Sam Darnold may start week 1, but JJ McCarthy is their quarterback going forward. He has every bit as high of a chance as anybody else drafted because they're all top 15 picks. And he has a better chance than a lot of these quarterbacks because of where he landed. Washington is still a goofball franchise. The Patriots have no players. Atlanta, I don't know what the hell they're doing. Undermining their very expensive quarterback. That was their plan. And now you give JJ McCarthy all lasers pointed at his development from Kevin O'Connell, from Josh McCown, and building him into the best quarterback he can be over the next couple of years. And the next step is to extend Justin Jefferson. So they will have Justin Jefferson presumably extended soon to go along with their first round pick from last year, who we just sort of gloss over that was a huge hit for them last year. Oh yeah, they got Addison too. Whoa, that's actually a first round draft pick that is made good on, that is now very valuable and important. And by the way, remember when we were talking about, would you give up Jordan Addison to try to move up? Well, instead they didn't have to. So they have him. TJ Hawkinson will be better by halfway through the season with his ACL. They need an interior offensive line. They need a long-term running back. That's really it though, for their needs on the offensive side. And then on the defensive side, now we went from last year, it looked pretty dark at times on the defensive side. At the beginning of the year, oh man, it looked pretty rough. And when you're talking about the defensive side, though, they go into free agency. Yes, they had to let Danielle Hunter go. They go into free agency and they land Jonathan Grenard, who is a pretty young player. I think he'll be 26, 27 at the beginning of the season. So that's someone who could be here for multiple years. And Andrew Van Ginkel will be here at least 2 years. Blake Cashman, can't forget about that one, along with Ivan Pace. And now you add Dallas Turner to that mix. They do need more defensive tackle help. They got some rotational players. They need cornerbacks. No question that they need Mekhi Blackman to become really good. They need a Caleb Evans to take a big step from last year. That may not happen. Byron Murphy, I think, can move inside. Shaq Griffin may not be a long-term player. There's maybe 1 or 2 more years left of Harrison Smith, but eventually he's not going to be there. It's not a finished product, but it has all the bones of a team that's going to be together for a while. And 2025 is the mark where we start of saying, all right, well, hey, by the way, we're going to have a draft next year. That's nice. Not having to trade the 2025 pick. So we will be doing this next year for all of you who have enjoyed the show. Hope you come back next year because they didn't have to give up that. But what next season is a lot of finding out. So last year we found out some things in a step back year about Ivan Pace, about Josh Metellus, about Jordan Addison. And so next year is going to be a real find out year of how far along is JJ McCarthy? How much development might he need? How good is this defense now? What do they need for 2025 to take a step in order to be a contender in 2025? But you can see it all laid out. Nobody ever knows on draft night whether any of it will work the way that you hope it works, right? That's just a fundamental fact. But as far as logic goes, as far as playing it out in the best process you can, the most overused word in sports history is process. Every team that doesn't have answers will just say it's part of the process. But if we judge the process for the Minnesota Vikings of the way they have handled the offseason this year, the offseason last year, and then this draft, there is nothing less you could grade them than an A, the way that they have handled this entire thing, because they didn't re-sign those veteran players. And it was so important to let Thielen go, let Delvin Cook go, let Eric Kendricks go, and refresh this roster and overhaul this roster and not extend Kirk Cousins. I mean, Kirk Cousins' new team isn't even buying Kirk Cousins, and they paid $100 million for him. I mean, the Vikings look pretty good. When do we pick next? I don't know. 2027? No, it's Saturday. Saturday is the next pick in the 4th round. I'm not sure after today how much they have left, but yes, you're right, James. The Paul Allen screaming JJ to JJ is going to be pretty epic. It's going to break your radio probably, but to 108 is the serious answer for when they're picking. It's Saturday in the 4th round. But as far as, and guard is, yes, everyone's first pick. But as far as bringing the plan together, using a distinct process that they had laid out for years to be able to get here is an A+. What's up, John?
Just more reaction to how the Vikings and what the Vikings have done. Our buddy Chris Trapasso again on the Dallas Turner pick. Hefty price in trade up, but premium position and sky high upside rusher. Lights came on in 2023. Stand up outside linebacker type with otherworldly length. Awesome bend, pass rush moves, still need work, must add strength. Nice get for Brian Flores, grades at a B. Field Yates says, following a series of trades, the Vikings now have just 3 picks in the 2025 NFL draft, a 1st-round pick and 2 5th-round picks. But you replace Kirk Cousins and Danielle Hunter in the 1st rounds, and you didn't have to give up a whole lot to do it. Absolute win.
So do you have right in front of you again what they did to get up to 17? My brain shut that off the minute you said they got to 17 and I went into Dallas Turner mode. So what was it again that they used to trade up? Do you have that there?
I'm pulling it up now. I don't remember off the top of my head. Here we
4th
go.
rounder?
Yeah, 4th rounder, the number 167, 8, and 2025 3rd and 4th rounders to move up the 5 spots.
Okay. So it was a lot. Yeah. I mean, when they moved from 11 to 10, that wasn't all that much, but this is quite a bit. So yeah, I guess they sort of blew out next year's draft, but they still have the 1st-round pick for next year. And they get a starter at edge, a starting quarterback. They really couldn't ask for much more than that. So let me give, I'm going to assume that they have no more plans to draft tonight, because how would that even happen after giving away all of their draft capital? So how about this? About maybe a half an hour of just sheer reaction, because I'm still kind of Jared Verse goes to the Rams, which I thought there was a report by an insider that said that they were guaranteed to take offense. Guess that was wrong. So we'll just go like straight up reaction, your reaction, my reaction, and we'll go back to the beginning. Let's just circle all the way back, because through this entire thing, and I appreciate so many of you following along, I've kind of been over here, over there, laughing hysterically at Kirk Cousins, responding to the trades and trying to break down players on the fly and all that. But why don't we go back to the beginning now that we could take a deep breath? In fact, let me get one more of these. Only one Diet Dr. Pepper tonight. That's how intense this has been. All right. Let's go back to the start of the draft. Obviously, Caleb Williams was going number 1. Washington didn't surprise us at all, even though nobody knows what they're going to do. And then they did the thing that everybody thought they were going to do, which is take Jaden Daniels. Number 3 was where it started to get very interesting, because throughout the day, there was nothing that indicated that New England would move off of that pick. And all the way until the last minute, there were reports coming out. New England doesn't want to trade the pick, but maybe. New England doesn't want to trade the pick, but maybe. All the way until the Vikings reportedly and the Giants called the Patriots and said, here's our final offer for Drake May. And the Patriots said, we're not going to do it. What that meant to me was that the Patriots were never giving the Vikings Drake May, period. That all of their public, maybe we will, was just to make sure that they were a football team and didn't tell anyone who they were picking or what they were going to do. And maybe there was an offer in some magic land where they give up Justin Jefferson or something where the Patriots would have taken it. But instead, the Patriots all along had their eyes set on Drake May, and they decided to pick Drake May. I did not look at that as a failure of the Vikings to make that happen, because it just seemed so blatant that the Patriots were full of it when they were saying that for the right price, they might move. No, for no price outside of something totally insane were they going to move off number 3. And you can look back, depending on how far you want to go back in history, and you can say, look, the Vikings could have gotten up to that range had they not won any games after Kirk Cousins got hurt. And you would be right. And you could say maybe they could have gotten there if they had the 6th pick, or if they had the 4th pick, or the 5th pick. And that's true. Had they not won a couple of games with Josh Dobbs, you're right. They may have been in a better position to get Drake May. Still, it seems like there was no world where the Patriots were going to move off their future franchise quarterback. So you weren't going to get him. No one else was either. Then we get to 4 and 5. And we have this tension of, wait, are the Vikings going to trade up for JJ McCarthy? Is everybody going to be right? Is all the draft analysis, all the mock drafts, are they all going to be right that the Vikings are going to trade up to get McCarthy at 4 or 5? 4 comes. They stick and pick. 5 comes. They stick and pick. And then the moment, the do or die moment, which was, all right, are the Giants going to do this? Because the Giants have this bad albatross quarterback, and they have a bad roster, and they have hot seat head coach and GM very quickly after a disaster last year. Are they going to put all their eggs in a McCarthy basket? And it turned out all the Giants wanted was Drake May, but they did not want anyone else. And they went with Malik Neighbors. So we get to 7. Do the Vikings trade up here? Do they make sure that Denver can't go and up and get their guy? No, they stick. Then Atlanta sets the draft on fire by picking Michael Pennix at number 8. Totally stunning. Not stunning that Pennix was a good prospect. Stunning that he went to a team that just paid so much money for Kirk Cousins. So much to the point where Kirk Cousins is immediately telling reporters he's shocked and disappointed. I will hold off my laughter for more podcasts in the future to keep going through this. But that left me speechless, absolutely speechless, that they drafted Michael Pennix while they just paid Kirk Cousins as much as they did. And then we get to number 9. Is Chicago going to trade with Denver and then leave the Vikings with one quarterback option? Nope. They stay. They take Rome Odunze. We get to number 10, and the Vikings say, we want to make sure that we get our quarterback, that we can develop our young quarterback coming off a national championship victory, that he can come in and work with Kevin O'Connell and Josh McCown. And they made sure they traded up 1 spot, and they did not give up very much, but they moved up 1 spot to ensure that Denver would not jump them and take the quarterback they wanted, which means that they clearly wanted JJ McCarthy more than they wanted Bo Nix, obviously. So they jump up just that 1 spot, don't have to give up a whole heck of a lot with the Jets. They land their franchise quarterback without giving up number 23. Incredibly important. Without giving up number 23, which allowed them then to see more quarterbacks, including Bo Nix, go to Denver, more offensive tackles go off the board, and the third best defensive player in this draft is sitting there. The Vikings push more chips into the middle of the table. They do reach into their future capital, which, is going to be a challenge for them in the future. Reach up and get Dallas Turner. So there's how it all played out from start to where we are now. I'm not sure who's picked after this. It doesn't matter. We're only focused on the Vikings. The Steelers are maybe considering acquiring Rick Meyer or some other washed up quarterback because they already have two. But now we know what the whole picture looks like. And what it looks like to me is the Vikings have now put together a roster that is imperfect and that needs some work still and is not yet in a position to compete for a Super Bowl. But for the first time, I would say, since they walked off the field in Philadelphia in 2017, but maybe you could say a little farther, for the first time in a very long time, in many years now, you can look at where they are and you can look into the future and say, I can see it. Because in 2018, when Kirk Cousins signed, you could see it. It wasn't the right move ultimately, but you could see it. You could say, all right, well, if they're the number one defense again, then I can see it. I could see how they would win and see how they would go deep into the playoffs. But since then, you have not been able to see it. Since that failed, you have not been able to see into the future and say, I know how this could work. I've seen it before. I know how it could work. And in 2019, when they lost to San Francisco, when they got drubbed by San Francisco and walked off that field, I had no belief whatsoever. And I remember standing inside of the stadium in San Francisco. They have these really amazing photographs of like Joe Montana and Tom Rathman and Roger Craig, like these super cool old like magazine covers and game day programs. And I was standing there on the phone with Judd Zulgad when I was working in radio. And what I was saying to him is, I think they're going to have to tear this thing down. I don't see any path to this team being competitive again anytime soon. And in 2020, they weren't. In 2021, mildly, but not really. In 2022, they take one last gasp at it, and they come up short on 4th and 8. Atlanta didn't check down tonight, by the way. Atlanta, they threw it down the field with picking a quarterback. But in 2022, they have a magical season for about 8 weeks, and then another typical 8 weeks after that turned out to be not enough. And when Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell got here and they didn't rebuild immediately, I'm going to tell you the truth. I was very concerned. I was very skeptical, extremely skeptical. But when in 2023, in the offseason, when players started coming off the roster who were older and expensive, when they started chopping off major limbs from that roster, when they said no to Patrick Peterson coming back, when they moved on from Zadarius Smith rather than paying him, all that whole thing, that's when it started to appear like, I think they've got a plan. I think they might know what they're doing here because they're doing the right things that were shocking for a team that won 13 games, things that we've seen almost no one do for when they won 13 games. And at that moment, I don't remember which player it was that they let go, Thielen, Kendricks, but when they had finally completed lopping off most of the old players from last year's roster, that's when I thought Kirk Cousins was done in Minnesota. And when he said something to the effect of, we'll check in next March with his contract. Okay, that's where it looks like Kirk might be done in Minnesota. And at that point, I remember that when we were in a preseason game, Dane Mizutani and I were in the press box and we were talking about I know when this was. This was probably week 4. I think it was week 4 that they lost to the Chargers. When they lost to the Chargers, I don't know which week it was. Was it week 3? Might have been week 3. And my comment in week 3 after they lost to the Chargers was, this is the closest moment since Philadelphia in 2017 that this team has been to a Super Bowl. Because they're finally going down to rebuild to go back up again. And well, they still ended up with the 11th overall pick. What tonight is them finishing that rebuild that they started in that previous offseason that has now brought them closer to being a legitimate contender where they have not been for such a long time, where you cannot look down the road and say, all right, well, if they just give Kirk a guard, I never bought that. You never bought that. No one ever thought that that was true. Oh, they just get him a guard, he'll be better and they'll win. And that was never true. If they were going to have won with Kirk Cousins, it would have taken a much better defense. It would have taken a much better offensive line. It would have taken a near flawless football team, which was never going to happen with his price tag. And this cannot be overstated that at this moment, they have in 2025, like $4 million that go to JJ McCarthy or whatever, $6 million in salary cap space dedicated to a quarterback. That is crazy in comparison to what it was with Kirk Cousins. And that money that they get to spend now can go into the rest of the roster, and they can get as close as they possibly can to building that perfect roster that they've been aiming for around JJ McCarthy. So it's not, is JJ McCarthy good or not? It's, how does he fit within this entire ecosystem that they've created, with this entire competitive rebuild roster that they've created? How does McCarthy fit into that? It's not just, is he good or not? He's going to have to be good, no question. But the quarterback is also 98% of the time also a product of everything around him. And now they can put everything around him. So you can look into the future and you can see it. And that's my biggest takeaway, is that you can see it. And you can also see too, one of the biggest wins of the offseason was keeping Brian Flores. And now he gets an outside linebacker type who put up huge numbers at Alabama, who has versatility, who has elite athleticism. And that's what you replace Danielle Hunter with. Another great move, because instead of Danielle Hunter, they now have Grenard, Dallas Turner, Andrew Van Ginkel, Blake Cashman. That's a lot. That's a lot to have, as opposed to Danielle Hunter, who I just have the utmost respect for, but older and injured. Couldn't have handled it much better. Truly could not have handled it much better. And now we take off. Now everything becomes interesting. And I mean, this, Loaded Guitars says, best I've felt about this team. The best that I've felt about this team since covering them, as in, what are their chances to win within a certain time period? Just for example, 2016, when I first got here, Teddy Bridgewater was the quarterback. That looked like a team that was ready to explode. And then his knee exploded, so it didn't work out. But 2017, training camp, the way that Sam Bradford looked felt like it could be a real contender. The way Sam Bradford looked in week 1. And then when they started ripping off all those wins, since then, there have been very fleeting moments that you actually looked at this team and believed that down the road, within the fairly near future, they could legitimately compete. And now you can. And now you can look at the Bears and the Lions and the Packers and go, are you behind them? Yeah, you are behind them, but you can catch up. You can catch up with a lot of cap space next year. You can catch up with the rookie quarterback advantage. You could catch up if McCarthy becomes a star. Of course, he has the potential to do that. And you could catch up if this defense ranks in the top 5, which with Brian Flores, it has the potential. It's wild to see it come together, guys. It's wild to see it come together. Jonathan, jump in here and tell me what Kirk Cousins' agent said to Pete Thamel. Can you pop in here? Do you got that? What is that? Is it going to make
Okay.
me laugh?
Oh, it's going to make you laugh. So I'll just read. It's 3 tweets. Pete Thamel says, spoke to Mike McCarthy, the agent for Kirk Cousins. He said the only heads up the Falcons gave Cousins about picking Michael Pennix was a call while the team was on the clock. He just signed a 4-year deal for $180 million, the first 2 which are fully guaranteed. There's inherent frustration and confusion from Cousins camp as they didn't use that pick to help the team in 2024. They instead drafted his eventual replacement because he's put on, or before he's even put on a Falcons helmet. Cousins understands the business of football and is ready to move forward, but there was understandable surprise. That coming from Mike McCarthy, his agent.
Well, you know, I've always thought about this, Jonathan, with sports. One of the things that I love about sports is that 2 people can be in totally different parts of the world, totally different financial brackets, different ages, different backgrounds, and have the same emotion watching sports. Me and Kirk Cousins at the same time being freaking shocked is really funny to think
all
about,
of us
because
are shocked.
my face looked like his face, but then it changed where I started laughing and he started frowning. So that was different emotions pretty quickly, but we were both shocked. And I think that Red Star is right, that what his agent actually said cannot be said on this family show. And that's probably true. I mean, look, somebody else earlier said that Kirk can wipe his tears with his $100 million. And that's true. But you know what Kirk can never escape is every team he's on just looking for somebody else. It's really something.
It really is amazing how that just keeps happening to a guy who keeps making bank. And yet the teams continue to just look for the next guy after him.
Oh, great question from Scott. Was Netflix filming Cousins today? Don't worry. He'll edit that out like he did everything from 22 that he didn't like in the Netflix special. He had final editing powers, so he'll just make sure that's not on there. Or he'll make a little documentary about it, as he did when he was screwing the Vikings out of more money by using the Jets. That was an odd thing to say. Yeah, this is a family show. I have been known to use some foul language in my personal life from time to time, but I don't like it for here because I know that a lot of people of all ages and maybe religion and so forth. So not everybody wants to hear that language. So I stick to FCC rules. I got used to it when I was on radio. It's all good. So anyway, if you're Kirk Cousins, man, you got to be out of your mind right now, because the thing that here's why I couldn't help but laugh. I'm going to start again. Here's why I couldn't help but laugh is Kirk Cousins never did a postseason press conference ever. And I don't mean playoffs. I mean, after the season is over, he never did a locker clean out press conference ever until this year. And when he did his locker clean out press conference, and I was 3 feet away from him, he's talking to us so cocky. He's saying, look, somebody's going to want Kirk. Okay. Like, I know my Achilles is going to heal. I'm going to get the dollars, but it's what the dollars represent. And he's just so into himself at that moment. He's like, Kirky's getting paid, boys. And I was like, actually, wow, that was the most baller I've ever seen Kirk act. That was kind of cool. And he goes this offseason and he's right. And the Falcons owner forces them, presumably, to spend more money than I've ever seen ever go to a quarterback of his caliber. Crazy stuff. $100 million. And we all go, okay, guess we're going to move on, right? All the people who said, how are you going to get a quarterback as good as Kirk? They all saw that $100 million guaranteed and went, never mind, somewhere else for way less, right? And so he goes to Atlanta. He puts on the Dirty Bird thing that everybody remembers from 1998. And he's doing his whole thing. He's doing this super happy press conference and he's tampering and he's telling everybody he's tampering. And he's just really all about himself. He's feeling like a total baller. And then his team drafts a quarterback. Boy, life changes fast, doesn't it? You just, you never know what's next. So anyway, there's several parts of tonight that I guess you could feel a lot of different ways about. You could be super amused by what happened with Kirk in Atlanta, which is where I'm at. But also, as somebody mentioned, and the comments going by so fast that I'm sorry if I miss who said what. This is the first time in a long time. It's not the first time since I moved here in 2016 that you could believe this team could really be something, but it is the first time since they've done what I've wanted them to do. That's the funny part. That, in 2018, I wasn't into the Kirk Cousins idea because the concern was naturally that Kirk Cousins wasn't going to be good enough and that he wasn't the type of quarterback to take you over the top at $40 million or whatever it was then, $30 million a year. So that was why I was against the move. Didn't like it. And took a lot of arrows for that from a lot of Vikings fans that really liked it. And then really, really liked it when certain controversies popped up in 2021, but it wasn't a success with Kirk Cousins. And so that's what I talked about the entire time. Hey, it's not a success. I don't see a path. I don't know how they're going to do this. They're cap constricted. They're desperate. And you could see the desperation playing out in Mike Zimmer and in Rick Spielman. And you could see the frustration from Zimmer growing, and he got crazier. And it was just a total clown show. And there was just the entire time I was doing radio, then podcasting, then live streaming. And the entire time I'm sitting here saying, what you guys really need to do is not extend Cousins, draft a quarterback, and rebuild this thing. Stop pretending you're a contender and rebuild this thing. And finally, last year, they stopped pretending. Last offseason, not just this year, but last offseason, when they chose not to extend Cousins, they stopped pretending. And that was the moment that I started to think that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah had a hold of this thing and had sold the owners on this might take a little patience. And we have to give the owners of this team credit from that perspective that they did not force Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell to hang on to the Adam Thielens and the Eric Kendricks. So when they did that, then all right, now there is a chance that they could move on from Cousins and they could draft a quarterback when they did not extend him last year. And we talked about this a lot. That I'm starting to see it come together, guys. And they made some bad signings last year on Marcus Davenport, but those were short-term type of things that might have had some upside, but probably not. And it didn't really matter. It's just like, we got to fill out the roster. We'll take some shots at people, whatever. So we go then to this offseason, and the moment where Kirk signs with Atlanta is the moment where it felt real that they could get to a position where they could drop a quarterback into the best situation for a top 10 quarterback you're ever going to see. I mean, Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City, that's it, right? How many other top 10 teams, because usually the top 10 teams are bad, are this good for JJ McCarthy to start for? So he comes here, and now you start from here, and now you start to build. Yeah, wow, the first corner goes off the board. We would have still been talking about defensive players. We're only at the 23rd pick now with the Jaguars. Thanks for moving up, Kwesi. Now we could just talk about it for all this time. But to put it all together tonight, yes, to your comment, it is the first time in a long time that there is a view and a belief that they could make something out of this. And with JJ McCarthy, throughout the draft season, I was skeptical that he was going to be picked in the top 5. I didn't think that he would be. Believed that the Giants probably would not pick a quarterback. They didn't, which gave the Vikings an opportunity. And you have to give credit that the Vikings didn't panic. They didn't freak out. They didn't fly up to the top of the draft and trade 3 picks. And instead, we're patient and let the draft come to them. They didn't get cute. They didn't get crazy. They didn't lose their minds. They had at least enough intel to say, look, if we can't get May, and it appears that they would have been okay with Pennix or McCarthy from the report before the draft. that if they couldn't get May, then they were going to go with one of those two guys. So there was clearly an attempt throughout the league somewhere to try to get the Vikings to trade up. They didn't buy it. They didn't fall for it. And instead they let it come to them. And at the right moment, they made sure they got their guy. Clearly they liked McCarthy more than Nix. Those were the guys on the board. They take McCarthy. They're both good prospects. And McCarthy is a lot younger and maybe a better fit for Kevin O'Connell and this team and where they're at, with next year as really the year that they could have a chance to win. So there will be a lot of conversation about McCarthy. There will be some people who don't like McCarthy as a prospect and, think that it was a bad draft pick because they just weren't a fan of him in college. And I think you can live in two worlds, though, that if we look at this rationally, you can say, hey, throughout this draft process, I just really wasn't thinking that McCarthy was a top 5 prospect. And there are deficiencies in his game. There are things he's going to have to get better at. He didn't throw a lot of passes in college. We also have to wonder about that. And also look at where he's at now and how they got him and go, well, what more could you ask for? If you weren't getting Drake May, which you never were, what more could you really ask for? So yes, I'm sure that Jeremiah Searles, for regular listeners to the show, maybe a little down on this. I haven't gotten a text from yet. He was not a fan of the McCarthy idea. Maybe it's a little bit different though, in taking him in the top 10. So here we go. The next thing is that, and yes, he threw very fast at the combine. His football traveled very fast. It was like 62 miles an hour, second fastest at the combine. But when it comes to McCarthy's tools, that's important to focus on. He is got speed. He's got arm strength. He's played for a very tough coach before with an NFL environment. All these things are going for him. So even though I was on the skeptical side, even though I do think that there is risk involved, I also have said from the entire time, he's a great communicator. Clearly, he seems like he would be a perfect fit with Kevin O'Connell personality-wise, and that might be the biggest thing that it comes down to with this pick. So you can live in both worlds. You can have wanted Drake May. You can be very sad you didn't get Drake May. You can even like Michael Pennix more as a quarterback and think that Pennix was a better prospect. He has an unbelievable arm. He's definitely more mature than JJ McCarthy because he's been playing football for a long time. But you can't deny that McCarthy, even if he does not get to super mega star status with this team, has a good chance to win a lot of football games. And that is the key to tonight. And now we go forward. And so let's talk about that before we put a wrap on it for tonight, because I think I'm going to safely end the show before the end of the first round because it's late. And also they have nothing to trade back in. So, no reason to do that. But let's look forward a little bit. Tomorrow, JJ McCarthy will be introduced, and I'll have a podcast from TCO Performance Center about JJ McCarthy's first comments. I'm really excited to hear from him about being a Minnesota Viking and about his experience all the way through. And then we go to rookie minicamp and OTAs and minicamp. And for McCarthy's sake, the Vikings really should put down the cash that's required to get Justin Jefferson into training camp, into minicamp even. We saw Amon-Ra St. Brown and A.J. Brown agree to deals. It's time. Whatever it costs, make it happen. You're going to have the cap space going forward. Whatever it takes, make it happen. That needs to be done very, very soon because McCarthy and Jefferson need to get on the same page from the start. And through training camp, all of a sudden it became very fascinating because you have Sam Darnold here. He's going to set a good bar. This is another wise move that Sam Darnold has been through all the things that JJ McCarthy is going to go through as a young quarterback arriving in the league, except for the difference is McCarthy will have time where Sam Darnold was just thrown to the wolves. What we're going to see is Sam Darnold and JJ McCarthy compete for that starting spot. But if Sam Darnold wins it, I'm already preemptively saying it's okay You didn't draft JJ McCarthy for right now. You drafted JJ McCarthy to be a long-term quarterback for you, to compete for a Super Bowl within his rookie contract and then beyond. That's why you picked JJ McCarthy. But that's going to be fascinating. Every OTA, every minicamp, we get to go out, reporters, once a week to OTA's minicamp. There's access once a week in those things. That practice is going to be like must see, must report, must podcast from. And then training camp every day, following JJ McCarthy's process, listening to him talk, seeing how he acts each week and how he develops and where he goes from there. I mean, that's interesting stuff. That's exciting stuff. It's stuff that you haven't had in quite some time. And this counts, right? When we say that the Vikings have never drafted a top 10 quarterback and he was 10th. So now they have. And where do you get the quarterbacks who usually win? Top 10. So the Vikings got him. I don't care that he was QB5. I care that he was a top 10 draft pick. He was worth the selection for the Vikings. And now they will build around him. And every single thing that is done and said suddenly ramped up in intrigue. And no longer were we going, we'll see what happens. We'll see. Maybe they'll get a guard. They do need to get a guard. They do need to build around him. But if 2024 does indeed, as it's in the comments, belong to Sam Darnold, well, that'll be interesting as well. And then we'll go from there. But it'll be everything as ramped up in the intrigue going forward. So there you go. There is the complete and full takeaway of tonight's action and really kind of a recap of everything that brought us here to this moment. Two things I want to say before we wrap up. One is, did it not deliver? Wow. I mean, all of us get so frustrated and annoyed by draft night, especially me. Like, man, if I see one more mock draft, and it really came through the draft, because this feels like when you walk out of the stadium after a game-winning touchdown or something, and you just look at your friends and go, can you believe what just happened tonight? Wow. What did I see? Or, as people are mentioning, the Wolves. I mean, after Anthony Edwards goes crazy and you have that feeling, that energy, that intensity, like, wow, what did we just see? That's how it feels tonight. What did we just see? Shock, twists, turns, and the Vikings walk out of here with the third best defensive player on the board. And oh, by the way, the quarterback everyone thought they were going to have to trade up for. Instead, they essentially used their pick. Couldn't have played it better, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. The belief in this regime should be very high because they have handled this extremely, extremely well, including just playing it to a T tonight. The other thing I wanted to say is just a massive thank you to all of you who watched, played along, commented, laughed at me as I was laughing hysterically at Kirk Cousins. Through this draft season, we've seen so much more growth with the YouTube channel, with the podcasts. The energy is felt over here from all of you. And the support is greatly felt by me, by all of you throughout this draft season. And it means a lot to me. It really does, because it's a really fun time for the Vikings. And I like to be here narrating it, but it's not any fun if you're not there and we're not playing along with this together. And if I'm not getting your responses and your snark and your jokes and your, comments and reactions and feelings and everything else, you guys are what give me energy to do the show the way that I do. And it makes it great. So I cannot thank you guys enough for watching tonight. You guys could have watched anything, any other podcast, any other show, any channel, whatever you chose here. And I just thank you from the bottom of my heart. It was so fun. Just so fun. This is some of the most fun I've had covering the team. And so we got some news, Jonathan?
No, I was just listening to Kevin O'Connell's press conference that is going on right now. Couple of notes. Obviously happy with how it all played out. He did mention that kind of confirmed what everybody thought. in when they chose to trade up for Dallas Turner, that they didn't think he would be around, so they had to make that move. Says the best football is ahead of JJ McCarthy. When asked about the lack of, I guess, throws that he had in college, he specifically started mentioning his ability to move and extend plays and extend and get these long third downs that they may have from time to time because of his mobility and his ability to extend plays. He did key in on that and spoke a lot about that. And then he said a goal of his was to land the quarterback of the future in this draft.
Thank you, Jonathan. And by the way, while you're here, because I'm wrapping up, great job. Thank you very much. You were on top of this all night long. This can't happen without you. Nothing in Purple Insider can happen without Jonathan. Just so everybody knows that your role is incredibly vital, and it was fun to do this with you again. We did this last year together, and it's been so much fun working with you. So thank you for everything tonight, popping in, kind of being our correspondent, if you will, and producer. So thank you.
Thank you. It's been fun. It's been a blast hanging out with you, hanging out with everybody in the chat, all 1,000 people that have popped in and out throughout the broadcast, throughout the 3.5 hours while we've been doing this, because it's been awesome. Awesome caller. Well done.
For sure. Again, one of my favorite nights. And since someone in the chat asked where to buy my book, here's the book, Football is a Numbers Game. Amazon. Just go there. Search Football is a Numbers Game. You can find it. I mean, hey, if you give me the chance, I'm going to promote the book. But no, seriously. So thanks, everybody. And look, tomorrow's a new day. It's just like, we completed the story. If you love Netflix show, this was a season. And tomorrow starts a new season because we've got the introduction press conference. We've got more to talk about. It'll be a week from now when we got rookie mini camp. Something else, Jonathan, or did you accidentally bring yourself back in?
The Lions are taking Terry and Arnold.
Oh, okay.
The Lions traded up to 24 to take their cornerback.
That's a good move. That's a good move for them. So
they continue to make good moves.
Yep. It's going to be a battle, guys, and that's what makes it so interesting. It's going to be a battle. We might need to have a correspondent for just the NFC North. So tomorrow, keep your eyes out. YouTube channel. There will be a breakdown of JJ McCarthy's introductory press conference from TCO Performance Center. Thank you to Will Ragetz, Andrew Kramer, Dane Mizutani, those guys for popping in. And make sure you subscribe, like the channel, tell your friends, whatever. We're going to have a lot of fun breaking it down. And if you want to support the show, some people will ask, hey, could we do a super chat, whatever. The newsletter is the best way to do it. purpleinsider.com. Just click on any of my articles and go sign up for the newsletter there. And that will show up every morning, including tomorrow morning. I got to get working on an article. So again, my deepest, sincerest thank yous to everybody for watching tonight. Huge crowd, and I loved it. And this was a lot of fun. So thanks, and we'll see you tomorrow. Football, everybody. Football.